Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting on December 15, 2020. I'm Kate Ford, and on behalf of Santa Barbara Unified School Board, I'm calling this meeting to order. So let's first begin with information about language access for our community.
Thank you, Board President Ford. Good evening, everybody. We will have interpretation into English and Spanish. And so I will give this announcement in both English and Spanish. In order to provide language access, we will be providing simultaneous bidirectional interpretation in English and Spanish. If you are bilingual, you do not have to click anything. If you are not bilingual in English and Spanish, you will have to select your language in order to hear the interpretation. If you are on a laptop or desktop, at the bottom right of your screen, you will see a globe icon that says interpretation. Please click on the globe now and select English. If you are on an iPad or a phone, locate the three-dot menu and select Language Interpretation. Then select English and click Done. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace. Thank you. Buenas noches. Esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional en inglés y en español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada. Si usted no es bilingüe, tendrá que elegir su idioma para escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando una computadora, verá un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice interpretación. Haga clic ahí ahora y seleccione español. Si está usando su iPad o su teléfono, localice el menú de 3 puntos, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas, elija español y aceptar. En inglés dice done. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar con voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado. Gracias. Are there any questions with regards to interpretation? If there are none, then I will go ahead and ask the host to add me as an interpreter and we may begin. Thank you.
Thank you. And now could I ask Superintendent Maldonado to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. Of course. Good evening, everyone. And I think Mr. Rouse, you'll put up a flag for us. Everyone, please put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Maldonado, will you continue with your report and any announcements that you have, please?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I do want to start off by having late breaking news that I would like to share with this board and with the staff of Santa Barbara Unified. I would like to extend my sincerest and proud congratulations to our very own Ms. Sofia Rubalcaba. Hopefully she'll turn on her camera for a moment, who has been selected as the new mayor of the city in Ventura and is the first bilingual Latina mayor. So please join me in congratulating Ms. Sofia Rubalcaba.
Wow.
I think it's great.
Yay.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Congratulations, Sophia.
Yes, we're very proud of Sofia. And now we know the mayor of Ventura.
Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
So board members, we have a lot of end of the year items for you today, and I'll be asking for you to consider a few changes to our agenda in a minute. I want to note that we are bringing additional data to you because we want to remind ourselves that we are here for students. And so we'll be looking a little bit at some students' grades, and remind our families that here in Santa Barbara Unified, we have free unlimited opportunities for students to access learning and tutoring, which we will continue to communicate to our families and the students as we continue to monitor their progress in distance learning. I want to let you know also that I've been hearing a lot from many people about how they're feeling as we're coming into the holidays. We're going to hear an update on, the virus in our community and what it's doing, and it's really creating some feelings of isolation and depression in some. And I want to remind us of the importance of maintaining a positive outlook and a positive attitude in the face of a pandemic. However, that is so much easier said than done. So I want to just share a personal story about the period in my life when I suffered 3 major family losses within a very short period of time. And one thing that I learned out of that experience, that the best way for me to cope was to be of service to others and to do and find daily things to be grateful for. So I began a practice of journaling daily and listing 5 things that I could be grateful for each day. And the trick was to not repeat the previous day's items on my gratitude list. So as we come to the end of this 2020 year, I want to share a few things that I'm grateful for now that I'm here in Santa Barbara. The first one being, I'm grateful for being welcomed into a new community during a pandemic. I'm grateful to our food service workers, our maintenance workers who have helped us provide food and safe shelter. I'm grateful to our school principals who have persevered and maintained graceful leadership in the face of continued change, some of which happened hour by hour. They were able to continue to keep business as usual by coordinating open house events, virtual showcase, and parent conferences, just to name a few. I'm grateful to our classified staff who have made it possible for our small cohorts to start, our classified staff in our business office operations for keeping the business of the district going, like accounting and payroll that benefits students and staff. I'm grateful to our assistant principals, our deans, our counselors, our coaches, who have ensured that students and teachers are supported. I'm grateful for our infant and toddler teachers and staff who are so dedicated to the families they serve, and it is so clear they love their work and have a huge impact in our community. I'm grateful to our teachers whose job description has changed many times, starting with remote teaching, distance teaching and learning, to small cohorts teaching and learning, and now hybrid teaching and learning. They continue to show up daily for our students, and I trust that they will persevere. I'm grateful for our generous community who supported our families with access to the internet, food security, housing, and hosted our students at their centers and parks. Together, we are strengthening and healing our community. And of course, I'm grateful to our parents who trust us with their children, and we cannot exist without that support. And in closing, I want to say that I'm grateful to our students who have used their voices to demand that we provide them with an education that sees them, our Black youth students who gave us the clear demands, and our student advisory group because they are the purpose and why we're all here tonight. So with that, I just want to remind us, remain positive. We are coming to vaccines shortly. We will be back in schools. And if it helps you, please use the practice of journaling and a gratitude list to help keep us focused as we come to hopefully the end of this pandemic and get through the holidays. So with that, President Ford, our staff executive cabinet would like to pull some items off of our agenda today and move them to our January meetings, because we want to be able to give due attention to many of the very important items as we continue to move forward with planning and dealing with some of the more pressing needs, which are our fiscal and instructional priorities, which are part of our agenda tonight. I'd like to ask us to move item D2, approval of resolution 2020-21-20, approving entering into power purchase agreements and approving site easements to the Santa Barbara Unified Solar Plus Energy Resiliency Project. D4, approval of tentative agreement with the California School Employees Association and its Santa Barbara Chapter 37. Item E2, Board Policy 9150, Student Board Member, which we promised former board member Jackie Reed, and I promised to bring it to January with everyone's permission. Item E3, the 5-year lease agreement between Santa Barbara Unified and the Enterprise Fleet Management. So thank you, President Ford, for considering the changes to the agenda. I'd like to ask that we then take action to do that.
Oh, thank you so much. These agenda modifications make good sense to me, especially in light of being mindful, as you said, of giving each topic the time it rightfully deserves. And of course, that means that we're mindful of time management. So I wonder, board members, if I may have a motion to accept the revised agenda. Ms. Capps, thank you for making that motion.
Yes.
And that motion does include pulling items or pulling and postponing items D2, D4, E2, and E3. Thanks, Ms. Capps. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Sims.
Ms. Sims-Moten's raising her hand.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. And so with that in mind, I'd love to entertain the vote. So all in favor of modifying the agenda for tonight, please signify with aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. This motion carries. Okay, with that in mind, it's my turn, and I do have a few comments for tonight. I'd like to tell you that I once again, I just want to share that I feel so humbled and grateful for the privilege of being the board president in the coming year. But as my sister board members know and have shared, this is a collaborative team effort, and our challenges and mandates are very serious and very difficult. It's going to take all of us, the community, the schools, the district staff, the superintendent, and the board pulling together. I also was reflecting on the last 9 months and have so many people to be grateful for, as you said, Ms. Maldonado, but I do want to restate my gratitude and admiration to Ms. Capps for her leadership, her optimism, and 100% focus on the needs of our students. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
I know that I speak for the board also in feeling grateful for the involvement of our community in the most important issues that we faced. Of late, of course, that has been COVID-19 in our schools. But in the past few days, however, we have also received dozens of letters, maybe even 100 letters in support of the proposed ethnic studies classes, which is addressed later in this agenda, as well as the expansion of the ethnic studies program in all 5 high schools and the importance of following through with our anti-racist training for staff. And there were other suggestions which were really interesting also, as well as incorporating ethnic studies in our elementary schools. We aren't actually voting on that issue, the courses tonight, but we did pass a Black Lives Matter resolution in June, and we do remain determined to have our actions reflect our statements and our beliefs. And finally, as I've mentioned in other board meetings, it is difficult these days to properly thank longtime staff members who are retiring. So please allow me a moment to reflect on and thank these 2 wonderful employees. First, Teresa de la Cruz, who's currently the office manager at Santa Barbara Junior High with over 10 years of service to the district. And second, Ruben Luego, who is currently a warehouse operations team manager with over 18 years of service to the district. So please, will you join me in a virtual round of applause for these 2 wonderful employees? Thanks. So with that, we'll also continue our order of, as we're seated in the boardroom, and I'll solicit any comments or correspondence from my sister board members, starting with Ms. Munoz.
Hello. Yes, and thank you to, I certainly echo President Kate Ford. Sorry. The last year that we had, with Ms. Capps at the helm and her leadership, and all the unexpected, all the hard work that went into that to serve for the district to best serve the needs of our students, our families, our staff, and the community. So I certainly have, I'm grateful to you for doing that, Ms. Capps. And I also am, looking at, at the end of the year in terms of a list of many things to be grateful for, and for keeping the health and well-being of our students and our teachers and all of our staff, at the forefront. And also, the many emails that we receive, the many different concerns that, to know that we read every single email and keep that into account as we, do our service as board members. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. And Ms. Sims-Moten.
Thank you, President Ford. I almost said President Capps. You know how it just kind of lingers on the palate type of thing. Who's ever next? So no disrespect, but thank you, President Ford. So again, I am so grateful to be here once again, a part of this district. I'm so proud to be part of SBUSD, students and staff and board and all that it takes to run this organization, and certainly keeping our students' needs and wants and desires and for the future, keeping that in the forefront of what we do. I really do think, and also want to welcome Virginia to this. Welcome to our world, sometimes our jungle, but it's all good, right? It's all good. And just to, just to think of this time, 4 years, we were dealing with a lot of things, and this moment really, even in the midst of this pandemic, it really is a momentous time to really shift our thinking as we think about everybody, including all the needs of all of our students and all of our staff, and what does that look like? As difficult as this challenge is, it is a momentous time to really take a pause and look at what we can do, better, things that we can continue doing. So I really just appreciate the opportunity to once again be a part of this board, and appreciate all my sister board members, appreciate the community for what they do. We do not do this alone, and we don't do it well without the community and the support of everyone. And with that being said, I just wanted to add that I also had the opportunity to again be the liaison for the Santa Barbara Education Foundation, who really does a lot for our district to support us, so to support our students, support the needs of the students, because we have so many needs that obviously our budgets, it exceeds our budgets to do so. And we wouldn't be able to do half the things that we're able to do without the community support, and certainly without the Santa Barbara Education Foundation board. And what they do and what the community does allows us to really focus on the needs of the students. So I want to express that appreciation for that. And there's a couple things by sitting there that recently in our last meeting on Monday, the Santa Barbara Education Foundation passed a equity statement, which is so crucial to look at, because what equity does allow you to look, what are the needs or everyone at their need, looking at what their needs are and how we assess that. And so I'm very proud to be a part of that board who passed that. Oftentimes it's implied in our policies, but when you put it in a statement and elevate it, then it's actually saying that you're doing something about this, and it's going to be part of your policies and your procedures. So I'm proud to do that. You can certainly go on that website and look at that statement. It's there. So proud to be a part of that. And then lastly, again, with regards to the SOAR, which is they raise money for so many things, again, that allows us students to have access to a good, equitable education. And their latest campaign is the SOAR, which is Student Online Academic Resources. And they've raised about $250,000 to support Wi-Fi access, hotspot access, also to make sure that Art Online has the support that they need, also with regards to the PE teachers are now saying, hey, we need some supplies too. So I know that they've gone out and raised some additional dollars for that, to make sure that the students have the physical activity and tools and resources continue to do that, so they stay healthy and while we're waiting to get back in person. So just so proud of the things of that. And also music, making sure that we're able to make sure the arts and music is really critical for the mental health of our students. So again, I want to express my appreciation for being on that board, for what they do to continue to making sure that we are able to focus on the needs of the students and their learning part. So thank you. And again, grateful to be back for another term and ready to go to work.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Capps.
Thanks for the opportunity. This is the board correspondence, and I just want to thank, speaking of correspondence, all of the folks that wrote in about ethnic studies. I think it was about 100, and such interesting emails. We really appreciate hearing from the community. This meeting, I think got off to a wonderful start. Superintendent Maldonado, with your remarks. I don't think we've had a superintendent report ever like that, and I believe it was a wonderful display of, if I might say, female leadership, to talk from the heart about a time when you struggled in the past and how you got through that by doing gratitudes. And that's a technique that I use as well. It's really helpful. This is such a tough time. I read in the paper the quote, "This is a time of hope and horrors." It's the fact that our numbers are soaring, that the way that there are, and there's so many people in pain and in hospital and grieving the death of loved ones, yet we have a vaccine that will soon be in this county this week. So it's such a dichotomy, and the end of the year to be together here as we were hoping to be prepared to come back. We will remain a sliver of that hope, but know that that's daunting. And so it's just nice to be together this evening after a beautiful swearing in ceremony on Friday. And I want to especially welcome Virginia Alvarez to our board, and to all the board members returning, but especially Virginia as a new board member in your first meeting. Welcome to this group, and to President Ford, who's already started off with a bang like we knew she would by shortening our agenda and employing the time management that I had hoped to instate last year until all heck went loose. So, but thank you, President Ford, and to everyone and to the cabinet as we kick off this last meeting of 2020, quite a year. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Quite a year indeed. And of course, welcome, Ms. Alvarez. Your comments, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so honored, so proud to be here in such wonderful company of colleagues and professionals. So thank you. And this is quite interesting. This is, I promise, we did not coordinate this with Superintendent Maldonado, but I had as my first thing as a statement of gratitude. A statement of gratitude to all of you, the admin cabinet, the district staff who works behind the scenes to make this meeting possible. Believe me, I know what you go through. And a statement of gratitude to the teachers, to the students, to the staff, that you make things happen. It's been so difficult in this constant change, but united we can do this. We will get through this. We will open schools, and we're going to get through it. I know we will. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for the warm welcome. I look forward to working with you. So let's get to work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Alvarez, and thank you, board members. I do want to state as we conclude our board comments and correspondence that yes, we have so much to be thankful for, but I know I speak for the board in saying, Ms. Maldonado, we are so grateful for you. So please, will you stay safe and healthy? And with that, let's continue on to item number 5, which is, do we have any public comments on items which are not on the agenda, Ms. Trujillo?
President Ford, we don't have any public comment on this item.
Thank you so much. I'm going to push just a little further before our COVID-19 report. For the acceptance of donations, we recently received, I think, 3 donations. And so may I have a motion to accept these donations with much gratitude?
I move to approve, and I just want to echo what Ms. Sims-Moten said about the Santa Barbara Education Foundation. Right now, a lot of people are making end-of-year gifts. The way to help our schools is to support the Santa Barbara Education Foundation. So with that, I move to approve the generous donations that we've received recently.
Thank you. And how about a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. So board members, all in favor of accepting these donations, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor. So the motions, the donations have been accepted. With that, let's see, 3 minutes. Let's see if we can do consent agenda. I believe we have one comment on an item on the consent agenda. Is that true, Ms. Trujillo?
That's correct, President Ford. We have one public comment on item C3, adoption of the College and Career Access Pathways Agreement between Santa Barbara City College and the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and data sharing agreement between Santa Barbara City College and Santa Barbara Unified. And we have Ms. Veronica Gallardo. And Ms. Gallardo, can you hear us?
Yes, gracias, Sandra.
Sí. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Veronica here, SBCC trustee, but more importantly, a parent of a duly enrolled two high school students, Santa Barbara City College and Santa Barbara Unified. And the partnership that you have before you is probably one of our most important partnerships. And so many of you have been involved in seeing our students through from college to career, from kindergarten all the way through our pathways. And the reason I'm here today is because this has been a passion for me, not just as a board member, but as a community member, as a parent, as a volunteer, a City College alum. I think, Hilda, if I got this correctly, you started your pathway to higher ed at Glendale Community College. So we consider you as part of the community college system. At the community college chancellor's office, it reads that dual enrollment lets you earn college credit for college courses completed while you're still in high school. And those courses also count towards your high school diploma. And then it goes on to say to all our California kids, what could be better than that? And really, what could be better than that? The reason I'm here today is to encourage us to continue to have this conversation around dual enrollment. The issue of dual enrollment first came to me from the community back in spring of 2019. And since then, I've gone to talk with Sean and Ann, who have been very helpful in helping us improve this partnership that we have. I also got to connect with Kate and Laura, who were great in learning more about what's going on. Since this is on your agenda today, I thought what better way to bring this up again, because it's agendized, you guys can all sort of talk about it and really see how we can improve the future of dual enrollment in Santa Barbara so that we can do the most for all students. Currently, our students don't have the option like what our Challenger's office says. They can't take a course at Santa Barbara City College and have it count towards graduation requirement. They can get into the UC and UCSB will say, yeah, sure, great, we'll give you credit. But then Santa Barbara Unified's like, oh, wait, you can't get high school credit for that. So I'm really here to help us fix this, to improve this, to make this better for all of our families. If you guys, well, you probably didn't, we were all on remote learning, but I got the privilege of talking to so many families, and we had kids as young as junior high jump into our City College courses in the spring when things shut down. My kids alone took like 11 units this summer at City College. I know Patricia has been involved with the peak students. And so I really want this momentum that we've started with the Bowers Foundation, the work Patricia has done at on the west side with La Cumbre, to just get better for our families. And so I want to say thank you to Ann and to Sean for the progress that they've made since 2019. However, it is going to be 2 years now this spring that we've been trying to sort of improve this. And I want to thank you for approving this tonight. And I just want to open it up so that we can have a conversation about what we can do to better strengthen this program for all of our families. So thank you.
Thank you. And President Ford, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you, Ms. Trujillo. Well, I'm just going to, since it's 7:01, I'm just going to ask, I know that my board members have been studying our agenda and thinking very carefully about all items, but I'd like to see if perhaps we can pass the consent agenda. So are there any board colleagues who would like to pull an agenda item or ask a question about it? Because if not, I will ask for the motion.
And Ms. Ford, I do have a request before you pass the motion, if I may.
Please.
Once we hear from board members, if anybody has comments.
I'm good.
Great.
Seeing none, please continue, Ms. Maldonado.
Thank you for that. This afternoon, we learned well, this morning we learned and heard from our elementary principals on the item C2 elementary internet circuit upgrade. And I reached out to Cox, and I'm gonna ask Meg to explain. We actually found out that we could increase from 500 to 1 gigabyte at a cost that makes more sense. So I'd like to increase the contract with the board members' permission, but I'd like to ask Meg to please explain why this would make sense for us at this point.
So there's sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. So with a $4,800 increase to the contract, we get, we're doubling our bandwidth. So I think it's a no-brainer to do this for such a small 40% increase to the contract. So, and starting July 1, some of this cost will be offset by the E-rate. will be subject to E-rate. So that will decrease the cost again.
Well, thank you, Ms. Jete. So that's, please, Ms. Sims-Moten.
Just a couple questions. So are we increasing because we didn't have enough, or are we looking at the bandwidth there? Why are we increasing?
So we were going from 100 to 500. And when we shared this item with elementary principals, we did the math and figured out, wait, maybe instead of 500, we should go to 1 gigabyte, which is what secondary has had all along. And so we reached out to Cox to figure out the price difference. And that's when we figured out we could actually get double that, get to 1 gigabyte at a nominal fee. And that's why I'm asking for the change.
Okay. And could you just explain real quickly, Meg, what do you mean by E-rate?
So I'm going to have Todd chime in at this point, but basically E-rate is a federal program, and Todd, seriously, jump in at any time. It's been a long time since I've been involved in E-rate, but it's a discount on your bandwidth. So Todd, come on, help me out here.
E-rate is a federal program based on our unduplicated pupil count that they refund us a portion of the money that we pay. So based on our unduplicated pupil count, we were a 60% E-rate district last year, which means that starting in July, 60% of the monies that Meg is talking about will be covered by E-rate. We'll be responsible for 40% of that increase.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Ford.
Thank you. Ms. Alvarez.
I do have a question in one of the items in the consent agenda.
Is it a short question, or did you
Very
want?
short.
Very short. Go for it.
For the Santa Barbara Historical Ticket Booth, has that been completed? What's the status of the project?
Yes, that has been completed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, then I'd like to, before we go into the COVID-19 report, if I could entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the modifications as suggested by Ms. Maldonado.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. And a second, Ms. Munoz. Thank you so much. And all in favor of approving the consent agenda as modified, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. So with that, at 7:06, we can continue on with our COVID-19 report, and I turn it over to Ms. Maldonado.
And board members, I would be remiss if I did not say that I'm adding to my gratitude list tonight, Miss Susan Klein-Rothschild, who's here with us, who has been with us, who'll continue to be with us, who's an amazing partner. I'd like to just start off with our first slide. Next slide, please. Just remind us, we've been in such an interesting journey, again, adapting an ever-evolving environment where we've had to look at very honestly and openly with this board and the public around our health and safety preparedness, our facilities capacity, our staffing availability, and the choice by our family and in-person by our families for either in-person or distance learning. And within that process, we've also had changes to how we can open our schools in elementary, particularly because of the ability to have a waiver. So just to ground us in that reminder that it's been quite the journey, and that these are some of the things on top of what public health asks us to do to prepare for reopening schools. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to the amazing Susan Klein-Rothschild to tell us, how is the virus doing in our community?
Thank you. I would like to begin thanking everyone in the SB Unified community. I want to acknowledge something I think we all know and understand, which is that this has been a very complex situation. It's changing day to day. I come to you today with data that I didn't know until this morning, and I couldn't know until ahead of time. And all of us have taken what we know and modified and been flexible to adapt. And I think your board has done an excellent job. And I want to thank you for your patience with everything. Last time I was here with Dr. Dodds and Dr. Fitzgibbons, we learned that the county could not accept waiver applications for elementary schools. And that's because the state put something out that said, this was in July of 2020, that if there were more than 14 cases per 100,000 population on a daily basis, that would be too many cases to consider a waiver application, and that they need to be lower than that. What we have done in the public health department is step back and say, how can we make this work better for our community and for SB Unified? Thus, we've come up with an alternative we would like to bring to you tonight. And this is from the public health department in the county of Santa Barbara. We would like to say, we have lessons learned from other elementary school waivers that we have processed and approved. We have given those tips to your superintendent and your leadership. We would like to offer the ability to consult with your leadership about their waiver application now, to talk about the issues, the things that have been challenges with other waiver applications, the things that we can do now. As soon as we are in the range, in the metrics where we can accept formally a waiver application, we can move forward to do that and let you know. But if we consult ahead of time, then we have worked through the issues that may have come up. That means that we can streamline for you and give you an opportunity as a district to be ready to formally apply for a waiver. Now, if the waiver is applied for and approved, it doesn't mean you make the decision as a school board or a leadership to necessarily begin in-person instruction, but it gives you the approval to make that decision and do it at the time frame that works for you. So I want to let you know that that's really important, and we've made some changes in that regard to help your district and to help your students have an equitable chance, an opportunity to have in-person learning. We also have some information in terms of data I want to share, and I don't know if those slides are next. Yes, thank you. This is the current status as of this morning, as of noon today. You will see there are only 4 counties in the entire state that are not purple. Purple is widespread COVID. The numbers and the surge that we've all heard about is happening. It's in the wrong direction. You will see that the actual number of positive cases in Santa Barbara County is 24.4 per 100,000. And I remind you, at the beginning of October, it was about 4.1 per 100,000, which is hugely different. The other number you see is the adjusted case rate for tier assignment. Adjusted case rate means if you in the county are having more people test than is required, we'll adjust your rate down. If you're not having enough people test, we'll adjust your rate up. So they're adjusting our rate down to 19.2. The actual rate is 24.4. And the actual positivity rate has increased dramatically. That means out of everybody who's tested, 6.1% are testing positive. We really are seeing a tremendous escalation here in Santa Barbara County. Next slide, please. This is an example. Remember, we started in the spring on the left-hand side. It was very low. We had our July uptick that was very difficult, headed down. You'll see the bottom of the red. Beginning in September and October, we were all ready to go into the orange tier. And then, just as the experts have predicted, following Halloween and Thanksgiving, our numbers are going straight up again. This is really a concern. Next slide, please. So that is an increase in the number of positive COVID cases that are laboratory tested in Santa Barbara County. This slide shows, out of those who take the test, how many are positive. For a long time, that has not been an issue. That has been the community test positivity rate, and it's been in the black. Recently, it's been increasing too. So we have more positive cases. We have a higher percentage of people testing positive. And we just learned today, Dr. Fitzgibbon shared with us, that they had the most hospital admissions for new COVID cases at Cottage this week than they've had since the beginning of pandemic. Basically, the situation is worsening and it's not going in the right direction. Next slide, please. So the decisions about the stay-at-home order are based upon the intensive care unit bed availability. This is actually a little dated because it changes day to day. The San Joaquin Valley in the middle is now at 0%. They have 0% ICU bed capacity. So the Southern California region, which goes up to San Luis Obispo and then goes all the way around and inside again, that is about 1.7%. We are considered part of the Southern California region. You may have heard that Ventura, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara counties have all requested the state that we be removed from the Southern region. Our numbers are different than the Southern region, and we should be looked at based on our numbers as a tri-county area. Next slide, please. And this is the difference. You can see the orange line is the Southern California region, all region 1, and the blue line are our 3 counties and our capacity in the Central Coast. And Dr. Fitzgibbons tells me as of today, we are still okay, although they are concerned, quite honestly, at the tremendous number of new cases. You may have heard yesterday, Monday, 360 new positive cases of COVID. Over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, it was 325 cases for both days. When there's this much positive COVID case in the community, it's hard for us to all have a low risk of transmission. We're all at a riskier point. We are seeing the post-Thanksgiving surge, and we're coming into the Christmas holiday and the winter holidays. And we are communicating the best we can. You love your family, you love your friends. Stay home this year so you can see them healthy next year. I know that's what I'm doing. I'm seeing my granddaughter on Zoom. That's how I'm doing it, because we're all concerned. So at this point in time, we have not heard back from the state about the stay-at-home order. We are still in Region 1, and we look forward to hearing back from the state at any point in time. I think the other thing I just want to share with you is that I have regular communication with nurses and leadership in Santa Barbara Unified and all districts in Santa Barbara County when there's a positive case. I've been listening and keeping track of those positive cases. I want you to know that most positive cases, more than half, are staff, are adults. And more than half, those are mostly cases to a very high degree where the transmission occurred outside of school. We are not having a lot of transmission in our schools. The isolation and quarantine rules are working. And it's not just us, and it's not just subjective data. We have a new report, a new study today that was just out of Mississippi. They just looked at almost 400 children and youth who tested for COVID. And they looked at the children and youth who tested positive and compared them to those who tested negative. What were the factors that were different in those children? And it's interesting because the children who tested positive, this is up through 18 years of age, younger than 18, they were more likely to have close contact with people who had COVID. They were in gatherings with people outside of their household, and they lacked consistent mask use if they went to school. Attending school or childcare was not associated with any increase in positive cases. So we know, and we have seen it, schools and teachers and administrators and staff follow the guidelines and the masks and the separation, and they work. And that's why we've had so little transmission within school settings. So we really want to keep our kids safe. We want them to be healthy emotionally and academically, and schools are able to do that, and we're getting data that supports that. So I wanted to share that with you tonight, and thank you for your patience in this ever-changing world.
Next slide, please. Ms. Chate.
So since July 1, we have served almost 500 and 700,000 meals in the school year of 2021. And we're very excited about that. Even though we're lower than we would in a normal school year, that's still doing pretty well considering we're doing the grab and go at our sites. We will be serving winter break, and you can see on your screen the days and times of those servings. So I'll pass it off to Superintendent Maldonado.
Thank you. So board members, in light of the fact that we won't be able to go into hybrid mode starting January 19th, as we had decided earlier, we want to just give you a little bit of a look at our timeline, our modified timeline. We will continue in hybrid when we come back from break on January the 4th. We will continue to work with Susan Klein and Public Health Department to get our waiver ready for approval. And we want to make sure, we will be sending a message to families after this meeting to ensure that we let families know that we are not starting school on January 4th or on January 19th in hybrid learning. And that also includes looking at, once again, our small cohort in athletics. And we may be postponing small cohorts in athletics as well when we return on January 4th, as we continue to monitor the virus and continue to work closely with public health. Next slide, please. And I did there was a question by a board member about, so what are parents feeling like? And this is a conversation Susan and I have had. We have worked so hard preparing our facilities, talking with staff, looking at our health and safety protocols. And this is just to give you a sense of the number of parents at elementary, junior high, senior high who selected to be in person and hybrid in the red tier or better. So this is just a look at the data for the results of what parents wanted back in November when we initially surveyed and they made their selections. Next slide, please. I'll turn it over to Dr. Wagenknecht to give us some information now on attendance and enrollment.
Right, good evening, board. This chart shows the current chronic absenteeism rate comparison between December 12th, 2019 and December 12th, 2020. And though, as you know, the criteria for attendance is different during COVID-19 in that students are in attendance if they, it's measured through different things such as logging on or making any sort of contact with the school and their teachers. It is educational to see how student attendance varies for in-person learning versus distance learning. And so you can see that by school. And on the right, we have our district-wide metrics. So our chronic absenteeism rate is lower during this time period. We have a few schools where chronic absenteeism has actually increased, but for the most part, it is the same. Next slide, please. So we do see, in terms of chronic absenteeism, that despite this overall reduction in chronic absenteeism, we do still see the disproportionality between demographic groups. Those do still exist, and the team in student services is examining this data more closely to look for any trends and patterns that may jump out. Next slide, please. So in August, I shared with you that we had seen a noticeable decline in enrollment. Thought it good to bring it back to you again, and we have continued to see a decline. It's not as significant as we saw this summer, but we've created an analysis that explores that decline more specifically, and you'll see that on our next slide. So the question we ask ourselves is really, we want to know why we are seeing the decline in enrollment in our district. And we did see 77 students enroll with us, but 170 have unenrolled since September 1st. We found that while 30% left us to attend other public schools, private schools, and homeschool locally, more than 60% left because essentially life happened. There were moves out of the country, out of the state, out of our local area. There were hospitalizations of 3 students. And the best news, though, is that 15 students graduated. So I want to end this piece on that high note, that we had 15 students who did complete their diploma. Next slide. I'd like to move on and share some information about our positive cases of COVID on campuses. During the time that we've had small cohorts in athletics running, we've had over 2,500 students participating in small cohorts and athletic pods since September, or beginning in September. Those students have been supported directly by over 300 adults, and in fact, indirectly by hundreds more working on the campuses. And you know, while we have had 25 positive cases since October, and have had to quarantine 10 cohorts or athletic pods, we do continue to be proud of the fact, and this supports what Susan Klein-Rothschild was saying earlier, that we have had 0 known transmissions of COVID on our campuses despite these positive cases. We're finding our campuses to be safe places. I do want to point out that 68% of these cases, that positive cases, have occurred since Thanksgiving. Next slide, please. I also have some data for you on our small cohorts. You can see the data here, just a few important notes. First, these numbers were taken as of November 13th, which was prior to our county dropping back into the purple tier on or around November 17th. I surveyed our principals yesterday to get a general sense of how things are going since Thanksgiving, and they shared that participation in the cohorts has declined since Thanksgiving, primarily because of the increase in COVID cases in our community. Next slide, please, and we'll look at our secondary schools. So our secondary cohorts are here, and note that some of these schools, you'll see higher numbers, and they are pushing the upper end of the small cohort percentage, the maximum of 25%. The high numbers of participation in these cases are in large part a result of opening up participation in cohorts such as performing arts and career technical education. So that's why you see the increased numbers in a couple of those schools. All of our principals, elementary and secondary, are currently looking at reconstituting small cohorts in January. Maximizing the staffing that they have and really targeting our priority students who need increased academic support. So we're using January as a reset time for small cohorts. And now we'll hear from 2 of our principals who will share their thoughts about and experiences regarding small cohorts. Anna Scharfeld of Santa Barbara Community Academy and Bill Woodard of Dos Pueblos High School. Anna, we're going to have you go first, so go ahead.
Great. Good morning, board members and Superintendent Maldonado. My name is Anna Scharfeld, and I'm the principal at Santa Barbara Community Academy. I have been wanting small cohorts on campus since we went into distance learning in the spring. So when we had the opportunity, I was extremely eager to get started. Our students' attendance has increased from 75% during the spring distance learning to around 98% now. And our 3rd through 6th graders in our cohorts have made a little more growth in reading than our general student body. I believe the reason for this positive data are the social emotional factors that are often hard to capture as numbers. Our staff came together as a team, and the ongoing communication between our supervisors and teachers resulted in better support for students. When we were in the red tier, teachers were coming on campus and working with students outside, and that personal connection resulted in increased participation on Zoom and learning. As one teacher stated, we got more done in an hour than we have in 2 months. Our students also benefited from the socialization with their peers and SBCA staff. They got to hold a luncheon for cohort president, pretend they were entomologists during breaks, make up rap songs during lunch, and had someone just 6 feet away to talk to or get help when needed. Also being told, "I'm so glad you are here. I love seeing you every day," made all the difference for our students' self-esteem. A challenge has definitely been having enough staff to run our cohorts. All our classified staff have done an amazing job taking this on, in addition to doing their primary job. But people get sick. There are family emergencies, even in a normal year, and people have close contacts and have to quarantine for 14 days in a COVID year. So covering when people were out has been a challenge. Also, because of safety guidelines, once a student is sick, they have to remain home for 10 days unless they see a doctor. And then sometimes it has been hard to get them back on campus. I have learned a lot about distance learning through our cohorts. Being able to see how students engage in a Zoom lesson from their perspective, standing behind them, has been invaluable. We learned that Zoom works really well with a small group, which is one reason why even when we moved our reading intervention groups completely online, they continue to make progress. As a result of this learning, we are already planning for small changes, such as regrouping students by grade level instead of by intervention. This will make it easier on our supervisors to keep track of schedules and create more opportunities to work with students offline, especially with our first and second grade students. But before doing so, I need to provide some additional training, especially for our new staff.
Thank you, Ms. Scharfeld. And now, Mr. Woodard, if we could hear from you.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Maldonado. I echo a lot of what Anna Scharfeld was saying about being eager to start with the cohorts. We had students at the beginning of the year who could not get internet access because they lived on the ranches up in Goleta, and we were desperate to get them on campus. We also had our Academy for Success seniors being able to come on campus, and we were able to expand our cohorts pretty rapidly with the help of our campus security assistants who we redeployed to oversee individual cohorts. The success of the program is that we've been tracking the data since they started. 66% of the students increased their GPA, and 60% of those increased it by one whole letter grade, 1.0. And so that's the proof in the pudding that them being able to come to campus every day, be supervised, be supported, definitely pays off. I will say another benefit is just having the kids on campus has been uplifting for everybody on the campus working to see students again and to have their energy on campus has been really, really great. Our schools are safe, and that's another reason why this has been a success is we've been able to practice all of our safety protocols in maybe miniature form to prepare for hybrid. And that's the message I hope everybody hears is that we're ready to go, and these small cohorts have helped us prepare for that. Certainly the shift from red to purple really took the wind out of a lot of our sails. The students had to pick a cohort, and some were in academic and athletics, and they had to pick one, and some chose to be in athletics because that was the thing socio-emotionally that was keeping them happy, and we've been trying to support them in other ways. Some stayed in the academic cohorts and gave up their athletics or their other cohort. And we were just on the cusp of starting our performing arts ones and other enrichment ones too. So we're hoping that we can, this is only a pause, as Fran says, not a cancellation of those experiences for those kids. So our numbers have shrank, and they've shrank considerably in the last week or so too. And that's not surprising where we're at. Some families elected to have their students stop attending, and others, like I said, moved from one to the other. I guess the biggest challenge I would say is that it's not very fun to be with the same 14 kids in the same classroom without your teacher all day long. and also to have a 90-minute lunch in between your classes where you're not able to leave campus or interact with others. So we've turned our courtyards into little dance parties with music playing to give them a little bit of fun, because 90 minutes without a lot to do is a long time. So that's a challenge. And when we shifted the new schedule in the spring, we hope to keep students that are in our more fragile populations coming. And with the 45-minute lunch during the spring, that'll be mitigated a little bit. And of course, there'll be lots of other students on campus when we do hybrid. So overall, I'd say it's been a success, not without its challenges, not as exciting for the kids. Again, as hybrid will be, where they'll be able to interact with other students, but it's been a good opportunity for us to test drive all of our safety procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Woodard and Ms. Scharfeld. And now I will turn it over to Ms. Ana Escobedo.
Thank you, Dr. Wagnick and Principal Scharfeld and Woodward. We are so thankful for all that you're doing. So today I want to give you all a little bit of an update. It's our mid-year report, as Superintendent Maldonado shared with you all. And so I will be giving you an update on elementary. So as you see here, for our first trimester of this school year, we were looking really closely at the grades, STAR assessment, and initial observations. And in looking at that, we did see that for our first reporting period, we did see an increase of 10% of elementary students receiving 1s and 2s as compared to this time last year, which is not where we want to go, but given the circumstances, it was something that we were seeing might happen. And very specifically in reading and writing, proving to be the greatest areas of challenge for our elementary students. In the STAR periodic assessments analysis for reading and math data, they revealed actually a 15% increase of student proficiency for reading. And we are considering the environments when we look at these percentages, but also a decrease of 8% proficiency in math for our students as compared to this time last year in the periodic assessments. And the initial observations are consistent with what we had already known, which is that distance learning is continuing to prove very challenging for our youngest students, that early literacy continues to be an area that we need to improve on. We are in great need of standards-based report cards in elementary that are also inclusive of ELD standards, and a need for interventions and tutoring supports in elementary. But the silver lining here, also something that we could have predicted, was that distance learning has increased our digital citizenship for our students, and I dare say for also all of our staff. So if we go on to the next slide, we can share with you in elementary, what did we do about this? What did we do to support especially our priority students in elementary? So here you can see that in the areas of academic attendance, social emotional learning, and as a result, the observations, we provided academic support through small cohorts, as you just heard about. We provided one-on-one assistance to students, outreach and home visits to improve attendance, as well as calm referrals and restorative practices to address their social emotional needs. And we sought input from teacher advisory groups. We sought input from parents to help us along the way and make improvements. Our observations have been that the supports and interventions for these very specific student groups have made positive impact on their social emotional wellness, on improved attendance and engagement, as well as increased rate of work completion. So with that, I'm sure you're eager to hear what our mid-year report is for secondary, and I will hand that off to my colleague, Sean Carey.
Thank you, Ms. Escobedo. Good evening, Board and Superintendent Maldonado. You've already heard some reports of student data related to attendance and engagement For reporting out on secondary education, I am going to focus on student grades. There are many metrics that we like to use when assessing student performance, but we're going to be talking about grades because grades are with us. They're the ones that are readily accessible for us to be able to see and monitor. And we know about the impact of grades in the secondary space in terms of students' graduation, college career readiness, and post-secondary opportunities. When you see this overall grade data, it is from our what we call Mark II, or the end of October. And so for our junior highs, that's the quarter grade. And for our senior highs this year, that's a semester grade, with Santa Barbara High School and Dos Pueblos High School having converted to a Bell schedule. That's important because a semester grade is a credit conferring grade, or a permanent grade, as you will. It also leads us to I want you to be aware that as we do some comparison of year over year grades at this time, we do have grades from our most recent marking period, or the halfway mark in the quarter and semester. That just ended on December 4th. So we are processing that information and following up with it. But from our end of October grades, we see over a quarter of students with at least one D or F, and we see nearly 10% of our students with 3 or more Ds and Fs. And so we see higher numbers of Ds and Fs overall, and particularly for that, for priority students, as we've been focusing on our priority students. For those traditionally underserved groups, we see higher rates, disproportionately high rates of high numbers of Ds and Fs. So for example, among students with 3 or more Ds and Fs, and as compared to the proportion of enrollment, for every 100 students with 3 or more Ds or Fs, we would expect, because of enrollment, 55% of those students to be Hispanic Latino, but it's 88% of our students with 3 or more Ds or Fs who are Hispanic Latino. While only half our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged, 80% of the students with 3 or more Ds or Fs are. You can see the rates there that are very disproportionate for our English learners, students who are ever an English learner, and for students with disabilities. So again, we see higher number of students with these higher rates of D and F grades. And that doesn't just, we wanted to show you D and F rates, because while a D is a passing grade, students still earn a diploma with passing grades. But as we know, it's beyond the diploma, it's college career readiness that our students are entitled to, and that we want to ensure that every student has. We know, as has been pointed out by others thus far, that the pandemic conditions have exacerbated these data patterns. We know we're not alone in that in this district, and that's something that other districts are contending with regionally and even across the nation. And we know that students benefit from in-person schooling. So it's confirming all the things we know and believe coming in and coming through these experiences. However, that does not result in learned helplessness or a sense of defeatism for us. If you'll go to the next slide, I want to talk about some of the things that we have done and are doing and will be doing moving forward. We had some assets coming into the pandemic that have been a critical success for our students, and particularly students who may be vulnerable for one reason or another. Those are listed there. I wanted you to see particularly that we do have embedded math support, because one data point I'm not giving to you visually, but will relay, is that we see the highest numbers of Ds and Fs in math courses. So I wanted to make sure you saw that through line of embedded math support. And we have peer tutoring already existing in our high schools, but some of these supports look a little different, and that's moving us to that expanded support column. You've been hearing about small cohorts, intensive supports for emergent multilingual students. We are having every student with a D or F is experiencing a one-to-one counseling session, they and their families, and we are recording the outcomes of those counseling sessions and the interventions that result from those. We will be expanding our credit and learning recovery opportunities. They existed coming into COVID, but we'll be expanding those. And we still have tutoring. Peer tutoring has adapted. There are examples of online peer tutoring, and we have some new kinds of tutoring that students can access. And there you just see a summary graph of Paper, which is a platform approved. And you'll see that we've got, again, math being most highly subscribed. And you'll also see the number of total students with activity and sessions. You can see 635 essays uploaded for feedback from the trained tutors at Paper. So that's an online tutoring service. I wanted to also just make sure we highlight the fact that having this experience, some of these lessons are not new for us. Some of them we're having new insights around. It is not new, the message, and President Ford knows this, that we need to examine and revise our grading practices. And so this has highlighted that, which connects to the first bullet there, this idea that the conversation about what grades mean and are, I think is something that we're really building on through this experience and that we will be taking with us, as well as how we have more success in engaging students and supporting students. And specifically here, you'll see tier 1 and tier 2 highlighted for secondary education. So these are lessons that were not only sort of evolving very rapidly, rapid prototyping, I want to say through necessity being the mother of invention, but these will also be practices and takeaways that we have in a post-COVID reality. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker. And that's Dr. Becchio.
All right, well, thank you and good evening, board members. I wanted to bring to you just a quick hiring update, actually an HR update with 2 slides. The first one, I wanted to just give you a glimpse of what we were expecting to do in November. So I brought you this slide November 1st, showing you kind of what we needed to hire. And then I wanted to put right next to it our current December numbers, so you could see the progress that's being made on new hires. And, you know, this is roughly 40 people that we have secured in the last month or so. So I wanted to bring that information to you. And by the way, as I mentioned last board meeting, these new staff members will be deployed to school sites. They have been, some of them have been, and as they clear, they'll be deployed to school sites to help with small cohorts. Next slide, please. And then I did show you this slide as well, and I wanted to just bring it back to let you know that I did put in the tier 1. Some of those new district hires would be used in that tier 1, where we see principals already are starting to formulate a plan for how they're going to use their existing staff for coverage in those tier 1 and tier 2 coverage models. And then our team has been working, specifically, we've been fleshing out tier 3. We have specific individuals that are associated with the district at the district level that are assigned on our plan to school sites. And so we will be continuing to develop this and roll it out, but we've made some progress, some substantial progress on the planning of this tiered coverage model as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Maldonado.
Thank you, Executive Cabinet, for all of that work, and of course to our 2 principals, Ms. Scharfeld and Mr. Wooder. Board members, I wanted to just quickly review and thank again Susan Klein in Public Health for being so willing to help us through this elementary waiver process. I do want to point out that given the conditions, we expect to open in distance learning, but I wanted to give you a sense of once the conditions allow us to apply and go back into our hybrid model in elementary only, not in secondary, but in elementary only. These are the number of weeks it would take for us to shift the whole system over once our waiver is approved. So going back to what we thought originally we would bring to you before Susan gave us this great update was that we would consider week 1 the board decision for letting us apply for the waiver. And it looks like we can maybe skip a little bit of that now. Week 2 is when we would actually, after asking our families to reconfirm their selection, because now we would be asking potentially, would they want to continue in hybrid in the purple tier, if allowed. That notification would happen during week 2. Week 3, we would have time to arrange for the now hybrid model and implementing it in week 4. So this gives you a sense of the timeline and the activities that would need to take place once conditions change, and how long it would take us to reconfigure elementary classrooms, because it is slightly different. Well, it's not slightly, it's very different than secondary, where we are currently planning to prepare the groups of students based on parent selection so that they can pivot between in-person instruction and back to distance learning if it needed to be. But in elementary, as you know, is different because it's one teacher per 20 to 24 groups of students. So with that, board members, I had in the action agenda D5, seeking the board's permission to submit our waiver application as soon as the metrics allow, and given Susan Klein-Rothschild update to allow us to help us prepare that. That is the action that we are seeking from the board this evening. And that concludes our report as well. You're on mute, President Ford.
Sorry. Thank you so much for the report. I do believe that we have a comment from a member of the public on this item. Ms. Trujillo?
That's correct, President Ford. We have one public comment, and it's Ms. Karen McBride.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Good evening, President Ford. Congratulations, and members of the board. Welcome to Ms. Alvarez. And I want to say thank you to this really detailed report in the board report, and also thank you to Ms. Klein-Rothschild and her great support of our schools. I really just have one thing I want to say to you tonight, and that is that I would like to ask that the school district work in cooperation with the certificated union and perhaps the classified union in pushing to get people, those of us in public education who are considered essential workers, moved up on the list and become a priority in the state of California to receive the vaccine. I think that in so doing, it would solve a lot of the challenges that we talk about week after week after week. You know, you're talking about Dr. Becchio showed the statistics, and there's clearly sort of a difficulty getting people to sign up to be substitute teachers. If you could get people who are vaccinated and are willing to go back to school, whether we remain in purple and we get a waiver for elementary, or we go to red and there's still that emotional instability that people have about the nature of COVID, getting teachers vaccinated would go miles in helping the situation, making people literally safer, but also making people who don't receive the vaccine feel safer in sending their children to school and getting more of the help that their students need in person. You've seen the decline in enrollment because kids aren't comfortable, families aren't comfortable sending their kids to school with the increase in numbers. I just think that the impact would be great. I know that, of course, it is not just a school district initiative, but it would need to start with our cooperation with the county. We have this relationship with Ms. Klein-Rothschild, and I think that we can't start we need to start now. I just think that this is the direction that we need to move in, and we need to put some energy into it, and we need to do it collaboratively. I recognize the need to collaborate with our brothers and sisters in the classified union, with folks in management, because everybody is impacted. This is a huge population of people that I appreciate the statistics that you brought tonight, because you mentioned 1,400 employees.
Time.
13,000 students. It's a lot of folks that could be positively impacted by taking and hopefully making it happen. So
Thank you. And President Ford, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you so much. I do believe that we are all just absolutely or fairly obsessed with finding out more about vaccinations. Ms. Klein-Rothschild, do you have some additional information for us?
Yes, I'm happy to share what I know. I do know that the first vaccine will be received this week, and the people who will be receiving that vaccine are healthcare workers who work directly with COVID-19 patients and are most at risk. The others who are high risk and in phase 1 include people in long-term care facilities. Those people make up approximately 40% of the severe and impacted and deaths in our community and nationwide. The priorities for vaccination start at the federal level, and then they come to the state level. And here in Santa Barbara County, we have a local group that's been working on how do we get the vaccine to the people that in the first phase. And there's a lot of people in that first phase, emergency responders, other healthcare workers. And we are awaiting the guidance from CDPH. They make the decisions about those in the second phase. And the term essential workers covers a lot of people. And how will they decide which essential workers to vaccinate first is a really important question. So I would say to you, the first advocacy begins at the state level. That's where the decision's made, and then it rolls down to us at the county, and then we look at modifying and implementing in our level. So as a board, I would advocate that you look at your advocacy role that you can play at the state level. That's where it happens first. We've had conversations with all the public school superintendents. This is a priority, and for them, it's all school staff. It's not by a title or a role. All school staff who work in schools have the same risk and concern. So we want them considered as a full group, just as they are for surveillance testing. It's all school staff. So we're looking at the same thing. It begins at the state, and we have asked that when the state puts out guidelines for essential workers, and the county has their own work group, we ask that schools be represented on that work group for the logistics and planning.
Thank you very much. That's so helpful. And just so much gratitude to you, Ms. Klein-Rothschild, for all of your helpful, somewhat alarming, but very timely report. I also just want to share gratitude to all the presenters. I know you've been working so hard and very responsive to board member concerns. And a special thanks to Mr. Woodard and Ms. Scharfeld for your honesty, your hard work, and your optimism. I do have a couple of questions myself, but I would like to allow my board members to share their thoughts and questions now. Ms. Alvarez.
Yes, thank you for that excellent presentation. There's a lot of information to take, and I have 3 questions. I'm going to go in 3 different categories. The first one is for Dr. Wagener. The enrollment, it seems that we have dropped about 406 students from July to present. And I'm wondering if there's any patterns that you have seen in your analysis of the data. Is it a certain school? Is it a certain grade level? Or is there any more information that might help us to make decisions in the future regarding why the students are leaving? I know you gave us 170, but I'm wondering about the rest.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Alvarez. What we found in that some larger summer decline was that those were, the greater majority were elementary school students. And of the elementary school students, the larger group were transitional kindergarten or TK and kindergarten and first grade. So we saw our early primary years. We do note that school is not compulsory until age 6. And so we both anecdotally had information and then saw it bear out in the data that families were opting not to have their children participate in public school through distance learning. But we did have students of all grade levels opt into some other private schools and homeschool situations. And then this fall, it's been more of a mixture, though we did see some more attrition through kindergarten and transitional kindergarten because students were just having difficulty in a distance learning environment at that age.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, in the graph that you presented about chronic absenteeism, it seems like Harding School seems to be the highest, if I remember correctly. And I'm wondering what outreach programs we have in place to reach out to these parents, to the students that have a chronic problem.
Well, we, in general, whether it's during COVID or during quote typical time periods, our program that we run in conjunction with the district attorney's office really is an intervention program for families. The old model of the truancy program that's punitive has really gone by the wayside, and that changed actually when Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was Attorney General in the state. And so that is our greatest way of attending to folks. And so Jennifer Balacius, who's our coordinator of school climate and safety, works with the principals and high school deans to address students who are severely chronically absent through a series of interventions. And now that we've seen this data, Ms. Balacius will be reaching out to a couple of the principals who have those higher rates to see what support we can provide from the district level.
Yes, I'm hoping that there'll be additional support, additional outreach to find out these families might be in need that we're not aware of. So thank you for doing that. And then I have a question for Ms. Escovedo. And on the slide about student outcomes in elementary education on the third column, it says tutoring opportunities are not available in elementary. Can you elaborate on that? I'm wondering why there aren't tutoring opportunities available.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Alvarez. Great question. We actually, early on in the year, we did a inquiry into what kinds of tutorings and supports were out there, kinder through 12th grade. And we did find that for elementary, this was definitely an area of shortage. We did have one particular program that was fairly new to the district, not enough time to really be able to train people, give them the professional development that they need in order to implement because of the current situations. And then it was just something that we found was not really being used in part because of the lack of training, in part because it just didn't lend itself. It's not as accessible as maybe other tutoring programs have been. As a result of that inquiry, we are actively and actually right now looking for additional tutoring programs that we can incorporate into elementary. That doesn't mean that there hasn't been support. Obviously, the school sites all have their own, as I shared with you, different systems of support. But as far as tutoring, in comparison to what is available in the secondary, it's definitely missing in elementary, and we're working to fix that.
Well, thank you. I look forward to hearing your update on the progress that we're making to address that. So thank you. And then I have a couple of questions for Ms. Carey about secondary. Of course, I'm sure everyone is as concerned as I am when we see these grades. and the decline in math and Ds and Fs, the increase in Ds and Fs. So my question is, I know there's some programs in place, but it seems that we need to do more. So what else are we going to do, and what kind of support would you need from the board? And one of your suggestions there was about a summer program. If that is something that is feasible, we need to start working on that obviously right now, and to make sure we recruit, we inform our high priority students. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, how we are going to remedy this situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'll highlight three things. One is I want to really acknowledge our Teacher Advisory Council, who has helped us prioritize those things that we can do that will be most impactful. And that includes extended summer learning, but also it includes a real commitment on the part of our, I'm going to say specifically math teachers, to have time together to norm around what are the essential skills for Math 7? What are the essential skills for Math 8? So that there can be a norming of those handoff, sort of matriculation points, and there can be diagnostics, and there can be bridge programs. Even so, our summer extended learning isn't going to be just learning recovery and credit recovery, but also a bridge to the skills to come. So a very intentional focus on specific skill sets. So I've been very pleased to see that come from our teachers, as well as our math instructional support specialist and Dr. Roundy Harder. This real focus on which specific skills in math are the most essential skills, again, matriculating from one grade level to the next. The other thing I would want to highlight is this concept that we are becoming very committed to exploring and to executing on in the near future, and that is the notion of credit repair. So what we're more familiar with is a student fails a semester, they lose the credits associated with that, and they repeat the semester course. But it may just be that there was one particular unit of study that was difficult, like a geometry unit, or it may be that it was probability. And so what we're trying to do again is be more intentional about what specific skills or standards is it that the student was struggling with, and how do we do credit repair and have them just get that targeted learning recovery as opposed to having to start all over again with the course in full. So those are some of the specific things within math, for example.
Well, thank you. I know my fellow board members also have a lot of questions, so I don't want to take up all the time, but I also look forward to hearing your updates in this progress. So thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Who would like to be next?
Can I go?
Ms. Capps.
Thanks. Thanks for the thorough presentation. I have just three questions. First for Dr. Wag, because I think this is the critical question is, are kids getting COVID at school? And how is that going? And now that we're learning more data, thanks to Susan Klein Rothschild, we saw the data from Mississippi that indicates that it's not the case that kids are contracting at school. So I appreciate that. But when you said previously that the cases that we have seen aren't from school, can you just elaborate? I know you're doing contact tracing and sort of some diagnostic, but can you elaborate to perhaps reassure what gives you, obviously I know you probably don't know 100%, but what gives you the belief that that's not the case, or what's the indications there?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify what I mean by that. We say zero transmission. So what we have not seen yet is, we've had 25 people, students and staff, who have tested positive, who have been on our campuses and participating in cohorts and in athletics and working. We haven't had those 25 individuals transmit the virus to any other individuals on our campuses or in our district offices, to our knowledge. So we've closed cohorts. None of the individuals in those cohorts have contracted COVID during their quarantines. That is very encouraging. I mean, there's no other way to say it than we've worked really hard in the last 6 months to create safe schools. And our protocols and our efforts and everything we've put in place appear to be working. And so we feel like our schools are some of the safest places in the community right now.
I mean, that's stunning. So just to unpack it, so a student or a teacher or staff member is part of a cohort and is positive for COVID, but no one else in that cohort so far, knock on wood, has actually contracted COVID.
Right. So
that means that the transmission.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go. Yeah, go.
No, I was going to say, so of those 10 cohorts or athletic pods, say we have 130 to 150 people who have been quarantined through that process, and none of them have contracted COVID as part of those cohorts. That's, I think there's some really valid data there that we can point to and say, we're doing not just a good job, I think we're doing a great job of keeping our schools safe. And I do have to say, I need to give a lot of credit to our school nurses right now, who every day have become really good friends with Susan Klein Rothschild and are working hard weekends, nighttime, in conjunction with our principals, who are also working very hard to get on these things immediately and make sure that we're on top of it. So I'm not happy to talk about COVID, but I'm happy to share that data.
Well, that's amazing. And credit too to our students and teachers for following and staff for following the rules. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I can tell you in my household, my son is our COVID police for sure. So I'm not surprised necessarily, but thank you for explaining that. And I think it would be helpful, especially when we reconvene, obviously this data is extremely helpful. I understand that it's not, we probably will see, an outbreak or, transmission within our school. Let's hope not. But I'd also like to understand what's happening in our neighboring school districts that have been open. And if that also holds, because I think that's extremely important data to see how our protocols are working. So thank you for that, Dr. Wagnick. Second question is really to Susan Klein Rothschild about the vaccine. And I'm so glad that Karen McBride spoke and advocated for teachers and staff getting the vaccine earlier than later. I certainly want to weigh in and with my full support for that, and really asking what we can do. You said, advocate to the state, but if you could be more specific, and also to the working group. I understand all the pressures that would be on a working group in our county to figure out who gets the vaccine first. And I don't mean to diminish the pressure coming from very legitimate sources, all wanting that vaccine, but could you at this time or another time follow up with how specifically we can advocate to the state? Because I just think it's so crucial and such a key part of our success moving forward if our teachers and staff can be vaccinated so that we can, again, fully reopen schools.
It's a great question. I think there are some people who represent schools and school districts, and I think Superintendent Maldonado has been contacted by some about this. Their role is to know within the state. It would be the California Department of Public Health, the California Department of Education, and the governor's office. And we are getting a new director for the California Department of Public Health, who's been the former director at San Francisco County. So that person will begin, Dr. Thomas Agron, I believe, will begin in January. So that process will happen at that state level. I think your leadership has better connections than I do at that state, but all three of those entities would be ones I would work towards. And I do know there's a lot of pressure because there are a lot of people in that group called essential workers. Everyone from people who work at grocery stores, who people required. So it's going to be challenging, and there's not going to be enough vaccine at the beginning for everyone. So we have to be aware of that.
Absolutely, thank you. And lastly, I just, this is really for Ms. Jate or Ms. Barnwell, as we move into the holidays and we gather for food and just with our small bubbles, so many of our neighbors and friends don't have enough food to eat. So if you can, I just am so happy that of course we're staying open as we do every year with food service, but if there's a way that the board and the public can help get the word out, I would love to do so. So if you could just elaborate on your efforts to communicate the fact that our school system is open and delivering or having food for those who can pick it up. Maybe even showing that slide again or passing it around, but I would like to be part of that in the next couple coming days as people are making their holiday plans.
Absolutely. You'll see it's starting to circulate a little bit more around social media. So if you can share it there with your family, friend, the people you have in your community, it's on the website. We're doing a parent square. There are actual physical flyers being handed out and signage posted at each of the distribution sites. Matt Dittman let me know that I think a week ago. He said they'd already started advertising, okay, here's what to expect for the 2 weeks that we're off at winter break. I think Maria's on here too. We'll have to talk about her next appearance on Radio Bronco, but we planned on already making sure that we are communicating it through all the channels, both languages, so that everybody knows what to expect.
Thank you. And thank you to our food service workers who will be working hard over the holidays, and to all of your efforts to make sure that our families can get the food that they need. So thank you so much. Thanks all around.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ms. Capps. Ms. Sims-Moten.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to also just offer my thanks for the great presentation and detailed presentation, as always, appreciating that. I just want to add on to, with regards to the food services, certainly will do my part in reaching out to families in First Five. But I would ask Ms. Jate or even Ms. Maldonado, do you have the necessary financial resources to carry this through? I know that we talked about this a little earlier, that we're running at a deficit. And I just want to make sure, do we have the necessary things that you have to continue to make sure that there's no disruption of that?
Yes, I can speak to that. We have about 19% of our staff working during the holidays. This is usually a time where our 12-month employees have time to take off. So that's why we're limited to the areas that are the sites we're using. So yes, since they are working, they are the 12-month employees, not any 9-month or 10-month employees. So yes, we do have the financial backing or support from our staff members, yes.
Okay. And then Susan, this is a question to you. I know that everyone's, and I'm glad that, we're here having the vaccination, but I would ask, have we done the data that everybody wants to take this vaccination? It's here, but does everybody feel comfortable, even taking it? I know it's limited in terms of who's going to get it, but I also would want to know on the other flip side of that, are people comfortable with, having the vaccination, and know if you had in that data or if you starting to look at that?
Listen, that's a really important question. We need a certain number of people to take it to protect everyone in the community. And we have heard a number of polls in which some people are hesitant, they're skeptical, they don't know that it'll work. So the group Mask and Mighty that you see my background banner for is finishing working on messages about masking and no gatherings and no traveling. And we're beginning to come up with messages about vaccination, why it's important, how it helps our community. It's going to be an important message and we need to get it out. So we had some conversations about this today. We're going to be asking leaders in our community to help to take videos when they get their shots, talk about why they do it personally. Now we have a campaign, why do I wear my mask? We're going to do the same thing with vaccination. We're looking at paid ads. We're looking at other activities. This is really important, particularly with COVID, because there's so much misinformation and bad information out there. And we want people to be protected. And remember, at this point, we don't have vaccinations for children. We have vaccinations that are approved for people 16 years and older. So we need to get the adults vaccinated. We need to get guidance on that. And we're working on that with our group Mask and Mighty. And we're going to be working with that with our whole community, quite honestly. It is important, as you suggested. It's not who's eligible, but it's also who will get vaccinated so we can all be protected. Some people won't be able to get vaccinated, like happens with other kinds of vaccines. They're vulnerable. The rest of us need to, so we can protect the whole community.
Well, I appreciate that, and just to extend with regards to the outreach, where there are populations that just don't trust it, in terms of that, and oftentimes that's where the disparity is in terms of the deaths and sickness is there. And so, are we also including that in our outreach to really reach out and to gain that trust, or trusted individuals in those communities to ensure that that message is getting out, how important it is to, first of all, know the facts over the fear of it, and then secondly, how important it is for us all to to look at supporting getting vaccinated if you're obviously if you're eligible to do that in the various ways of allergies and all things that come with that.
I'm in full agreement. We've already started. We have some faith leaders who agreed to work with us. So we want to look at other groups to help us do this, and open to any suggestions and ideas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to talk to you offline about that a little bit further. So the other thing, so again, it looks like we're doing a lot of, being prepared for the safety, as we can see it in terms of not, spreading it or having the breakout that, that would happen if we're not as vigilant that we have been. Everybody in doing that, including students, teachers, everybody doing, what they need to do to ensure that we're all safe and we can eventually get back to in-person learning. So in the middle of that, as I was listening to the various things that are happening, the fact that we don't have, the necessary tutors that we need in elementary with regards to it. So are we working on that simultaneously? I know as vigilant as we are in terms of, being safe as we are in COVID to make sure we can get back. Are we working on those issues as well to ensure that, when we do come back, we do have the necessary tutors, with regards to that? And are we making the necessary changes in grading and all of those things? And so that's just a general question. What are we doing to balance that too, to balance those needs as well? And anyone can answer that spoke.
Sims Moulton, thank you for that question. I do want to say that I'm very proud of Executive Cabinet. We recognize the need to do some real strategic planning. So we will be working a couple of days during the 2 weeks. They've agreed to come in and do some strategic planning for us. There's a lot of work to be done, and we will let our principals take the 2 weeks off so that they can do full rest and recharge. But our cabinet members have agreed to do some of that planning, and we'll be continuing to report to the board as we move that forward.
I appreciate that. And then lastly, I just had a question, looking at the slide with regards to the chronic absenteeism, is that tied to our D's and F's, or is that just a different, D's and F's, meaning that there may be a lack of support or the different supports that we need to do? Are those two tied at all?
I will be honest and say I haven't looked specifically at the attendance rates for our students with multiple D's and F's, but my experience tells me that yes, we are able to tie that data together. And it's really our deans and our school counselors working together to support those students and families to provide them what they need.
So I appreciate
our new term is there are priority students. They are our priority.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I would just add one more point, and to Ms. Alvarez's point, in terms of making sure what the needs are beyond just being absent from school. How do we do that? And I know that we have a lot of programs in place with our family resource centers with regards to that. So looking beyond just the D's and F, maybe there's obviously something behind that, and what does that look like? And asking maybe a different question in this time. Even in COVID, things have been revealed differently. People being a little bit more open and understanding, sharing experiences. And so maybe there are different questions that we ask when we're asking beyond the D's and F's, or beyond why you're absent. So maybe just something as we think about that when we're talking to our families.
Right, absolutely. It's the root cause analysis.
Yes.
That gets us to where we need to be.
Yes. And again, thank you everyone for your work, and do make sure you get some rest and recharge.
Ms. Munoz, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the report and all the detail with all the presenters that have compiled all this data for us. I was also, concerned about the attendance at especially at Cleveland and at Harding School. And I was trying to figure out too, and why I had a question about if there will be, you know, more family engagement, more outreach in terms of trying to have students engage, you know, participate in the cohorts at the elementary level.
So I have to say that that both Harding and Cleveland, they've done a good job of bringing in students in small cohorts, and especially Cleveland. I mean, they're pushing at one point that 25% range. I want to reserve assumptions for why that's happening until we're able to sit down with Ms. Binkley and Mr. Sandoval and really look at the reasons, because they can be so varied. And the other thing is maybe we have to look at, is there an understanding on the part of their staff as to what the guidelines and rules are around attendance, you know? So I can certainly, we can report back on what we find in our support of all the schools that need the support and all the students who need the support, who are absent, chronically absent. Yeah.
Right, because yes, and one of my questions was, for example, well, one of my thoughts is, has attendance been, you know, has it been poor in a flat, you know, flat wise, or has it increased, you know, increased into attendance as they're participating with cohorts, you know, word of mouth, community, talking to others, and such.
Right. Well, and the so yeah, we have to analyze, go back and look at that data point and break it apart and look exactly at what you're talking about. Was October a bad month and then November was better, et cetera, et cetera. The great thing about chronic attendance rate as a metric that I love is that it can actually improve. Whereas other data points, once you get there, it's like you're just trying to stave off getting worse. But with chronic attendance or chronic absenteeism, you can improve it. And so that's our goal with those two schools and with all of the schools really, is to recapture and re-engage those students.
Great, great, awesome. And of course the support, you know, as you noted here, of like, you know, referral to COM, all the programs that are available, because it has had, you know, such an impact
absolutely
to our community. The other, let me see, the other thing also is, well, one, I really appreciate, you know, the principals presenting how they're handling things, you know, like Mr. Woodard in terms of the groups on campus and, you know, having some downtime and some, you know, fun activities, social distancing wise, and seeing how, you know, hopefully how that could also be duplicated on other campuses. And let me see. Yeah, so it was mostly that, like you said, like, what did you call priority students, right? Just in terms of, you know, so that students don't internalize that and and such, because it's been such a challenge. And is counseling available to, you know, to junior high and high school students? Are you seeing that? Is it, sorry, like telehealth? Is that what is available?
So students in preschool through 12th grade have access to therapeutic counseling on campus. A vast majority of that has been taking place over Zoom, but we even in the purple, they can come into school and receive their counseling through socially distanced means. So, but most of it is telehealth, and that is taking place, and that is one of the intervention options that's offered to students who are struggling academically, attendance, etc.
Excellent, great, great, yes. No, that's awesome, and anything that I could do, you know, to help support, please let me know. You know, I'd be more than happy to be involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. One is, or concerns. One is about students. I mean, we've heard this refrain a number of times this evening. And Ms. Maldonado, I was so happy to hear that it seems as if you've got an all hands on deck, think outside the box mandate going forward for addressing chronic absenteeism and all the and the rates of failing grades. I have a friend who's a child psychiatrist, and in talking with him, he is absolutely devastated by the number of students he is seeing who are experiencing so much depression, malaise, unhappiness, and certainly being absent from school and being and failing classes adds to that. So Ms. Maldonado, I wonder if you could just give us a little bit more information of what you're hoping to accomplish in your 2 days over break.
So we're going to be looking at becoming a more data-based decision-making organization. And as you see, we're beginning to be more transparent and open with our analysis and triangulating data so that we can then move our efforts in towards a student-focused agenda that really looks at what do kids need and what can we change so that we can re-engage them. There are some ways that I think we can also look at our investments in our budget. As was stated earlier, our lack of investments in elementary tutoring is something that we'll be looking at and trying to come up with ways that we can improve that. And all of that, of course, in light of the fact that we, rightfully so, have been focused on responding to the pandemic, but we need to get back to the business of focusing back on what's happening with kids and how can we move in the right direction to support them. That's a big picture, thinking about what we need to think of and looking at the next 6 months. What's happening in the next 6 months? While we're dealing with the pandemic, that we know are normal business things that will happen, like there will be SBAC testing as far as I understand it. How will we implement that? It's a modified version of that. And then opportunities in looking at our grading, as Ms. Carey said, and having those deeper conversations. And then of course, recognizing that our teachers have continued to change their job description, but still need to tackle some of these bigger complex issues in a simple way.
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to offer up a couple of things. One is that, you know, I love doing research, so I'm going to try to stay on top of what other districts around the country and the state are doing. We know that LAUSD has already made some decisions about failing grades. And also, as you meet, if any of you need coffee or candy, just reach out to me. Of course, I'll be home and I'm happy to help you with that. I do have one other question just about, and that's about staff. I continue to be concerned about our staff also, and this is for Dr. Becchio. I appreciate knowing some of the data, but I want to just dig in a little with you and ask you what keeps you up at night with regard to staff concerns?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think mostly what I'm mostly focused on right now is the obviously the hiring that we need so that we can make sure that either if there's a need to expand cohorts, we have staff to do that, or if we have a shortage of staff, that we have people to mobilize to those places. And so, I mean, the reason that's a pure HR function, and so it falls right on my shoulders, and that is, I think, what weighs myself and our office staff down the most. I was just interacting with Carla Preciado today, who's been doing a lot. Her and Brian Tangwood have been doing a lot of the work on these classified hires, and I can just tell through talking to her that it's the same thing. That's our biggest worry right now is when you have a principal that needs to serve kids and we don't have a staff to mobilize there to expand a cohort if that's what they need. So that's what we're just going to continue to work on.
Thank you so much. So to clarify, Ms. Maldonado, you want to go forth with your request on the action agenda item, which will be a little bit later. Is that true?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. And also, I just wanted to let the board know that Ms. Maldonado and I have decided to, hopefully there aren't any concerns with this, to move closed session to the end of the meeting so that we can continue on with this pace and to continue on with our agenda, especially because we still have 110 folks in attendance and the night is marching forward. So with that, Ms. Maldonado, do you think we should take a break or continue going?
I am a driver forward, so can we try to get on till 9 and then maybe take a break?
Sounds good to me. Okay, I think that leads us to our, let's see, where are we? Any other, yes, we have some action items. And we should start with the positive certification of the first interim financial report. Woohoo, Ms. Jate, please.
Thank you, Board President Ford, and welcome Ms. Alvarez to the Santa Barbara Unified Board Sisterhood. Tonight, Lacey Preston, the Director of Fiscal, and I will present the first interim and asking for board approval at the end. I'd like to start with on page 2 of the executive summary, Brian. You can pull that up. On the executive summary, the actual report.
Sure, one moment.
Okay. All right, caught you off guard, right?
That one wasn't downloaded.
Uh-oh. Okay, well,
Right. I have it here in 1 second.
Okay. There we go. There's the beautiful Peabody Stadium. So page 2, please. Okay, so I just want to do a couple board budget highlights for the first interim. As you can see, the general fund unrestricted operating deficit declined by about $3 million. And this is for 2 reasons. One, the increase of property taxes, which this is a typo on here, the $406,000. It is 3.3 million. I don't know how I missed that, but I did. So the increase from adopted budget to first interim was in property taxes was a $3.3 million increase, or a 2.4%. And another offset to the deficit was that we used CARES Fund to help with the food service, which was allowable. So we took 2.1 million of the structural deficit on that side of the house in Fund 13 and applied the CARES money towards that. So that reduced the deficit for food service, as you can see here, to 1.9 million. And as you can tell, we're still deficit in there, but without, they're essential. You can't touch them. You can't reduce staff, and we have no intention of doing that. However, if we do lose a person, they go somewhere else or they move out of town, we are not replacing them at this time. The property tax increase for the multi-year is about 4%. Our step and column advance is 1.2%. As I mentioned before, the food service contribution is 1.9, and now we are contributing to child development of 292,000. I have to say that child development got hit hard because they lost some money from their after-school program and charging fees for other students and offering the free childcare. But there are also child development and food service and special ed. These are all programs that are underfunded. So we should be working with our state to get funding for more funding increased in the future. And we do work on that. Second part, I'd like to look at the district continues to decline in enrollment. And you can see that my projection for enrollment for 2020-21 was 12,935. As of November 15th, our enrollment was 12,776, a variance of 159 kids. As of actual 1920 was 276. The enrollment for 1920 was 13,208, which is a decline from year to year of 432 kids. You can see over there on the projected enrollment variances, as Dr. Wagenknecht stated, it's K through 6 that you have the highest decrease of enrollment, and you have a slight increase of 9-12. Let's look at the state economy and a quick update on the state's economy and the federal economy. The state is doing really well, which they were shocked that they were doing this well. They are $13.1 billion ahead of budget of revenue, and for their forecasts. And that's from the LAO, which is the Legislative Analysis Office. Federal funding, as you know, we got $6.9 million in CARES. On December 18th is our last, we've asked everyone to get their invoices in for the CARES money, because a great deal of that money has to be spent by December 31st. We are really close to having it completely spent and have every intention that on December 31st, there will not be a penny to be found in the CARES funding. We will not send money back. So reassured that we will not be doing that. The new president, President Biden, these are some of the things that he has promised and ran on, and for his education funding. Special ed, as you know, that special ed on the federal side is supposed to be 40% funded since the beginning of time, and it has not been funded at that level. It's more like 10%. He's talking about raising it to increase $443 per student, and which would be approximately $5.5 million to us. But however, that's over a period of time, and I've heard 10 years. He plans to triple Title I, which we have about 2.2 million in Title I. So that's a significant amount of money. He has loan forgiveness for educators, additional psychologists, counselors, nurses, social workers, and other health professionals. He plans to add some money to infrastructure, and then also universal pre-kindergarten. Food service, as I mentioned above, we took 2.1 million of CARES to help offset the food service department. As I mentioned before, we are trying to cut expenditures as much as we can. As you know, we do not lease the mobile cafes anymore. As I said before, we are not replacing employees who leave us. And we're have caught up on or renegotiated our MOUs with our outside vendors. And we are charging for excess meals, because some of them would order, say, 100 meals, and then they would say they only use 60. And before, we were not charging them for the other 40. So now we are charging them for the other 40 as an example. And we are also charging the difference between what we get reimbursed and what the cost of the meal. Can we go to page 8, Brian, please? We had a question about the unrestricted restricted expenditure report regarding services and other operations. And it was basically, well, what is in here in it, and who is in here? And so there are a lot of types of services in here: auditors, attorneys, other contracted services such as FSA, COM, people like that. And then there's our temporary agencies. So for example, on the restricted side, when we can't find the people to fill the positions for the paraeducators, we are fortunate to be able to go to a outside service, and they have people who are just interested in working and never even thought about coming in to the school system. So it's a good way to get people more interested in our school, being in schools as a source of income. We also have speech pathologists and psychologists that we tap into in this kind of category. So we have extra people coming in to help our students. Okay, now Brian, can we go to the slides? So as I mentioned before, our this is our property tax slide, and it shows that you can see in the unsecured property taxes, there is a slight increase, and that's where the majority of the increase is happening. You can barely see prior year ERAF and supplemental, and I want to explain this, and I don't have to explain this to Ms. Alvarez because she's very much aware of this, that once you become community funded and you're solidly years into community funded, you stop receiving ERAF and supplemental. And so once the supplemental has been in the system, in the cycle of property tax assessments, it then moves into secured and unsecured. So that's why you get these big jumps, because if your property tax bill goes out and you sell your house in August and you miss that property tax cycle, that's called a supplemental. So if you're community funded, your taxes don't go into the supplemental and it doesn't go into the secured. So you miss a year of that property tax increase. If that house is worth $1 million, is on assessed value of $1 million, and then it sells for $3 million, you don't get that extra property tax increase until the following year when it gets into secured and unsecured. Our redevelopment revenue is just pretty much staying the same. Next slide, please. This is our total unrestricted revenue, and you can see that we are hugely LCFF sources, which is partly property taxes. But another growth that we've had in here is our minimum state amount, which is about 11.4 at first interim. It was 10 million and some change that it adopted, and that's because the governor, as you may remember, said he was going to do a negative 10% COLA. So that state guarantee is what was reduced. So you're seeing property taxes and that state revenue increase. Next slide. Unrestricted expenditures, as you can see, the blue line is first interim, the green line is adopted. Here too, we have increased. So even though we have increased in revenue, we are also increasing in expenditures. Next slide. Our contributions to programs, this is the blue is special ed, state special ed. The orange is special ed federal, food service, and child development is the gold. So I'm going to pass this off to Lacey Preston. No, on the next slide, please, Brian. There you go.
Thank you. This slide shows our total unrestricted revenue compared to our total unrestricted expenditures. We use the county's property tax estimates and the FCMAT LCFF calculator to project our revenue, and we are projecting an overall increase. As Ms. Jate mentioned, we are estimating this year to see an increase over last year of 6% in property tax, and then we are projecting an increase of 4% in the 2 subsequent years. Salaries have been increased to reflect step and column changes. And we have also increased benefits related to CalSTRS and CalPERS, and this has been based on the school services of California Dartboard. In the 2021-22 school year, we have removed the revenue and expenditures related to the one-time CARES Act funding. And This will have an impact on the transfer that we make to the food service fund. So in the 2 subsequent years, we increased the transfer to the food service fund by 2.1 million. All of these increases are causing the red line, which is total expenditures, to outpace the green line, which is total revenue in the 2021-22 year, creating a deficit. We bring the numbers closer together in the last year, and we'll continue to keep working on the numbers to get them closer in line going forward. We get the next slide? So this shows our district reserves, and you can see that over the years, the district has done a great job in increasing the reserves. In the prior years, the special reserve fund has increased with transfers from the general fund. Going forward, the special reserve fund will grow based on interest earnings. The restricted balance decreases, as you can see, that's that little purple area. And that decreases as we try to spend those funds in the year that we receive them. We don't rely on them to have a fund balance going forward. As mentioned in previous slides, the deficit spending causes the unrestricted fund balance to decrease in 2021, but it levels out in the last year with a slight surplus. So, and now I will pass it back to Ms. Jate.
Thank you. So this is just a little bit of fun facts here. I've been asked quite often lately, like, okay, so we're declining in our enrollment. How are we doing as far as FTEs and certificated employees? And these are teachers only. And you can see that each year we're decreasing by about 50 or about 5% over the year before, especially in the last few years. Or the teachers are 5% of our total enrollment. So we're sticking, you know, we have a really good ratio there, right? We're constantly at 5% of our student population. So as our population goes down, so does our FTEs. And that's a good job on the HR side and the principal side for really looking at their staffing. Just another little fun fact, we have 2 million square feet of buildings and we have 42 staff members to keep them in good repair. And that includes the 6 that we just added. So before it was a lot less. And since we've been in COVID, and you will continue to get this number, we have fed 871,000 meals since March 16th to December 8th. So again, kudos to our food service staff. And we appreciate them for continuing to serve our community. These meals do not include the adult sales too. These are just our food service for our students. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions from the board.
Thank you, Ms. Jete and your staff. I found that this report was extremely detailed and comprehensive. And I also just want to thank you and your team for graciously answering all of my questions. So other than just saying, I really hope that President Biden really comes through with these promises, I would like to open it up for any questions to my fellow board members. Salvarez.
Well, first of all, thank you, Meg. Thank you, Lacey. Thank you for answering all my questions. It's a great report, easy to understand. Great job. So if I hear you correctly, it looks like we received about 15.6 million in additional revenue from adopted to first interim. It sounds like we received about 10.8 million from federal funds restricted from CARES and some of that unrestricted, and about 4.6 additional, the majority in property increase on property tax, about 3.3 million. I think that's what I heard you said. So that's great news. 15.6 million in additional revenue. That's great. And then in looking at slide number 6, the one that Lacey presented, the unrestricted revenue versus expenditures, with a projection of 4% increase in property tax revenue for multi-year projections, it looks like our expenditures are catching up to our projected revenue. So if we're projecting 4% in property tax growth, are we also projecting a close to 4% increase in expenditures?
That's correct, because the PERS and STIRS is a huge increase. It goes up by 2% for CalSTRS and 3% for PERS. And when you're talking $61 million plus a 1.2% in COLA, step and column, and then you add the 2% increase to STIRS and the 2% or 3% increase to PERS, that's quite a bit of money going up. So yes, we have been teetering like this for quite a while. And until we start getting really deep into basic aid and our property taxes keep building and we watch our expenditures, we're going to be like that. It's, as you can see, for a while, we've been, 142 million expenditures in revenue. We've just been sitting there teetering like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the good news is that our property taxes seem to be holding up. So that'll be good news and something for us to think about in the future to look at our expenditures as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Any other board members? Ms. Sims-Moten, please.
Yes, thank you. I just have a couple of questions actually. And first, a comment. Thank you, Lacey and Ms. Jate, with regards to this report. Always very detailed and easy to read, and taking into account some of the suggestions that you made to make it more reader friendly. So I appreciate those changes. I just have a general question with regards to now including child development, but also with regards to food service, that we're continuing to run that deficit. And we've been, fortunate to have the coverage through, in this case, the federal funds with the CARES. But I'm just wondering how we are thinking beyond that in terms of how are we dealing with this deficit if we didn't have, the one-time funds to cover us. And so how are we thinking it structurally? So that's a question you don't necessarily have to answer tonight, but something to think about over term. How are we going to deal with that when we don't have those, one-time thing, those one-time monies to do that? I know oftentimes we've had to look in our reserve to do that, but how do we structurally start to address that? Because it could continue on to get larger if we don't look at it structurally. And then secondly, with regards to, yay, President Biden, I think he's finally got certified. So, okay, I guess he can call him President today. But when are we, the things that he's suggesting here, is that over time? When can we expect it, in terms of those pieces? And is that something that we are not necessarily putting in our budget, but as a future multi-year projections, are we going to be adding that based on when he's intending to release these dollars there, with regards, because that's a huge jump with regards to special ed, 443. So where can we start to look at that, and where do we do that so that we can look at our budget on a more equitable lens based on this?
That's a really good question. And we don't budget anything until we have confirmation we're getting it. So you're not going to see this money hit our budget anytime soon unless when he's sworn in on the 21st of January, that he says, okay, tomorrow I'm releasing, the 40% or the 30% additional income for special ed. And once that's said, then, then the state will release something that says you're going to get approximately this much per student. And until we have all that confirmation, we will not budget for any of it.
And
but it's good news.
Yes, go ahead.
It's just really good news. And I just hope it materializes, because this has been coming up for a long time. And we are part of a coalition to work on special ed increases. And you have signed letters, or I have written letters in your name to push for special ed increases. So there's a lot of advocacy out there. And so hopefully this will come to fruition.
Great. And so all the more reason to where there are structural, deficits in our budget to fix those things. So then we're steady, and so we can ride the storms, whether it's coming in delayed or don't, anticipate and don't come in, with regards to that. So that's something we want to look at. And then you mentioned about PERS and STIRS with regards to those increased expenditures. And I wonder, as we had to hire, new staff to make sure we're supporting the small cohorts, is that going to be impacted at all? Or are they temporary staff that's coming on?
Well, if we work over 960 hours, they are then put into PERS. So, or STIRS, I don't believe there's a number of hours, but I could be wrong. But I know that PERS, if you work over 960 hours, you are then qualify for PERS.
So is that something we're watching as well? You wouldn't necessarily have that, but just as we do this, and if we think differently in terms of how successful it is, we've heard some comments tonight that those small cohorts really, support those students. So if that's some type of learning model that we go to, or some piece of that, also keeping that into mind too, what that cost would be. Certainly worth it, but just, building that into it as well. So those were my comments and my questions. And again, I appreciate the report, the hard work on that. Again, Lacey and Meg, thank you for your work. And I've come to know this over the next 4 years, and I just really appreciate this report and the work that I know that goes into it.
Thank you. And I really want to say there's a big team on this whole budget, because it is a big budget. And I'd like to thank them also, because they've done a great job. But I do want to speak to your food service comment about the deficit. And yes, we are constantly looking for ways to reduce the deficit. But I truly believe until we get out of COVID, we're not going to be able to attack that as much as we thought we could have before we went to COVID. You remember all those meetings we had regarding having free meals or free breakfasts for the students who do not qualify. We haven't seen that part of it because we haven't been in school, right? Those high schools that were, said provision to breakfast and everyone ate for free, that cost us a lot of money. And we didn't get the reimbursement, only 31 cents on that. Those kids, once they come back, those kids will then be paying $3, $4, $5, whatever I think it's like $3.75, instead of them eating for free. So, we haven't seen that part of it yet because of COVID. We've made all the reductions we can at this point, and we're looking into grants and things like that. So we are trying to reduce the deficit.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that comment. And I would just add to that in terms of, at least through COVID, and again, it's crucially important to make sure that our students are fed. And in this case, we're really kind of spreading it out to the community. It's not just contained in terms of Santa Barbara Unified, right? So right. I would look at how that does. And if that's something that we're going to do going forward, I think it's really incumbent upon us to really look at this, because we're feeding the community out of one district. How do we then share that cost and share, because it's not just a need of Santa Barbara Unified, it's a need of the community. So how do we then work with partners to ensure that the community gets fed and not one entity is bearing that cost? So something to think about.
So you and I need to have a conversation, yep. So I can explain to you how that program really works because food service has got a lot of different rules, a lot of different programs, and it gets really complicated about but once we get back into school and we're feeding more kids, that's when we're going to start seeing some change in the deficit.
And maybe that's something we want to ask the new president to talk about food services as well. So, but I won't belabor that point. So thank you.
Hopefully they were going to give us another increase to our state funding. And I haven't heard anything back like that, because they did take that off the table. Yeah. Since they're doing so well, why won't they give us more money?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Ms. Munoz.
I don't really have a question, more just, appreciation of how this is so understandable in terms of the budget, all the work that went into it. And also, I was also concerned about like the food services and that's something that I'd like to learn more about also. And appreciate, having the food available, having, the food service staff go beyond, in terms of providing to the community. But thank you for, Thank you, Lacey and Meg and the team for presenting the, preparing the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Capps, do you have any questions or comments?
I'm good. They've been answered. Thanks.
Okay, well then let's go forward. Let's proceed with positive certification of the.
Okay, I thought you were moving on to the next one without the certifications. I mean, voting on it. Sorry, President.
Oh, ye of little faith. Let's proceed with positive certification of the first interim financial report. May I have a motion to approve this report? Ms. Alvarez.
I gladly move.
Thank you. And how about a second? Oh yeah, right there, Ms. Sims' motion. Thank you so much. And so now may we take a vote to approve this certification, positive certification of the first interim budget, signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
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 Wonderful, it has passed
Thank you.
unanimously, and thank you so much. At this time, let us take a short break. It is 9:03, so as per Ms. Maldonado's suggestion, how about a 7-minute break? And I mean 7 minutes, ladies.
Timer, set your timer, 7 minutes.
Tick, tick, tick. Okay, thank you. We'll be right back. Let's continue with the action agenda items. We have 2 more to go. This next one is on the adoption of the 2020-2021 local control funding formula budget. Is there something you'd like to say, Ms. Maldonado?
We're going to do our best to try to make this other complex topic around budget simple. And for that, we'll have Ms. Carey and Ms. Escobedo present the budget.
Thank you.
I'm going to actually start it off for the team. We are bringing to you this evening the budget overview for parents, also referred to as BOP. Next, so we're on slide 2. Ed Code requires the budget overview for parents as part of the LCAP. Due to changes caused by COVID, the LCAP was replaced with the Learning Continuity Plan, and the BOP for this year is now tied to the first interim budget report. The next slide will go over this new timeline, which Sean will share with us right now.
We just thought it'd be helpful because LCAP is a highly bureaucratic process annually to show you that it's typically in June. We see June 2019, June 2020, June 2021, all in maroon, that we would be reviewing our LCAP, both taking a look over our shoulder to see our annual update on the outcomes of our planned expenditures, and also looking ahead to the anticipated actions and expenditures for the subsequent school year. All of that, as Lacey said, was disrupted. And so what we've experienced since March is the operations report, which is a modified report in this June 2020. And then as you're familiar with, the LCP, or Learning Continuity Attendance Plan, or a COVID year, a COVID version of LCAP, truncated. And then this is the last component of our COVID year LCAP. So we hope to be back on cycle June 2021 with an annual update that will have us reporting on 2 prior years of actions and expenditures, as well as asking your approval as a board for our new 3-year 2021 to 2024 LCAP. And again, we just want to give you that visual to put it all together in one place. At this point, I'll turn it back to Lacey.
This chart is included in the BOP, and it shows the total general purpose revenue that Santa Barbara Unified School District expects to receive this year from all sources, and that includes federal, state, local, and property taxes. This revenue is then used to pay for the items listed on the slide on the right. That includes salary and benefits, maintenance and operation costs, which includes paying for the utilities, keep the lights on, keep the heating going during these colder months. Also includes contracted services. For example, you would see transportation included in that. And then we also have base programs and supplies. So we can go to the next slide. I believe that's Ms. Escobedo or Ms. Carey?
It's me, Lacey. Thank you so much. So for this one, for this slide, what you are seeing is the LCP, the Learning Continuity Plan expenditures for this school year under the COVID plan. And so the budget expenditures are here. You can see that this is a summary of what we plan to spend and on actions and services for the LCP for this school year, and how much of that total budget will go to increasing or improving services very specifically for our high needs or priority students. On the right, you can see some sample services for this group of students, which include at-home instructional materials for elementary, which we know we need it, bilingual aids for our newcomers and our EMLs to support them, educational software so that we can better engage and support our students with disabilities. Of course, also we are providing services and support for our first generation college bound students, and expansion of AVID, and then providing student health, mental health supports, as well as liaisons to increase and maintain support for our families during this time. I'll turn it right back to Sean.
So we don't control the template or the order in which the prompts come. Please, next slide. You'll note that Ms. Escobedo just addressed this year's planned actions and expenditures, but the last portion of the budget overview for parents has us looking back at last year and comparing what we planned to spend with what we actually spent. And so you'll see here that we're very pleased to have done a good job spending the $13 million plus in spite of school closure in March. And that what that did is it really truncated our ability to continue with the professional learning, the in-person professional learning that we do, and the sub costs associated with that. But we were able to make up for that with crisis spending in response to crisis. So you'll see there just a relatively negligible difference between what was planned and what was actually expended in spite of school closure. Our sites and left about 15% of their allocated funds unspent. But again, that means they spent 85% of what was allocated in spite of the school shutdown in March. That is all for us. Last slide just is an invitation for your questions.
Well, thank you so much. Board members, do you have any specific questions about this proposed budget? Ms. Sims-Moten, please.
Hi, thank you for this report. I just had a question on mostly probably going forward, or maybe perhaps it was even part of this year's budget, but how much of student data drives where we spend the dollars, or in the categories, or are they preset by the state that we have to spend a certain place?
So if you mean, I want to ask a question about your question. Do you mean the learning continuity plan this year? Or do you mean future LCAP?
Well, I'm thinking this year, the learning continuity plan, right? Because that tells me because of this, we had to spend here. Was that predetermined by the state or based on data driven in our own local?
Yes, I'll take a stab and then Lacey, you can help me too about how the funds are allocated from the state down. What I can tell you is that we looked at our own local phenomenon and student data and expressed student needs, including input from community, to determine what the most acute needs were. And then we planned actions and of course their associated expenditures in response to that. So there's no amount that is prescribed as a set aside, although there are guidelines, Lacey, we have to hit a certain percentage. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Sorry, there we go. So the learning continuity plan included all funding sources to address all of the students, but then there were areas within the plan where we could call out the funds that we were using to go directly to serving the high needs students. And that was the number that we saw in the second chart. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, the reason that I asked that question, thank you both for that. The reason that I asked that question, as we're, being data driven, because I heard about some data that we're going to be starting to look at, data dashboards. And so to really say, if we're using data to drive where we serve the most needies or the most, priority students, just making sure that where we're spending, that it also equates to the outcome of an improvement of the outcomes is where I'm trying to make that link between that, right? Because perhaps in our budgeting overall, would this give us maybe a baseline of how we spend it more equitably or in the right places based on the data? I know that I'm not quite articulating that right, but I'm just trying to see where we're spending our dollars. Are we getting the outcome that we expect, or do we need to, or will we use that data to then drive it a different way to have better outcomes?
No, I certainly understand. I think the best thing to do is just to circle back, if we can, Brian, to the slide that is the, maybe the one that has the green bar graph with the orange bar graph next to it. The one after that. There we go. Thanks so much. So all of the one-time funds, the 22 million, almost 23 million, again, as Lacey said, that goes to all students. So that helped us with hotspots. That helped us with professional learning. That helps with instructional materials for all. And then this part that you see that's about 9 million, that's what's highlighted in the box that Ms. Escobedo was referring to. These are the more targeted, what we call increase and improve services, or the above and beyond services that certain student populations received, in addition to receiving what all students receive. So those are student groups that you'll recognize from other parts of tonight's presentations and other board meetings. And I do hear you saying that you want to see that through line between identified need, planned actions and expenditures, and then what are the outcomes of those actions and expenditures. And I think you've seen some outcomes tonight, and you've seen some of our concern about how even with some of our planned actions and expenditures, we still have concerns about how some of the students in these various groups are faring. We've talked tonight about some of our responsive actions. And then as you heard Superintendent Maldonado highlight, we plan to keep redoubling our efforts to do exactly that, to finish that, keep connecting those dots all the way through from identified needs to outcomes that we can point to that are tangible. Does that help?
It does help, and I would just add, so thank you for that. Just in terms of, as we're talking about the opportunity gap, where does these all tie together? Where are we reducing it? How are we doing it, making that information tie together so that we can, we could easily determine, yes, we've done that. It's in several different places, but how do we tie it all together to say, hey, we really have, through these efforts, addressed in reducing the opportunity gap. And if we haven't, here's what we're using this data, we're going to be able to do other interventions. So if we could just tie that together a little bit more.
Yeah, and I will just say that you can expect that too in the full LCAP. The full LCAP will demand lots of narrative to describe, and we will try to also elevate the salient points of those long narratives so that that's very clear and comes through very clearly.
Yeah, that's I mean, and keep it in a sense where anybody's sitting that deep into.
I think we lost Ms. Simsmone's audio.
Seems like it.
Okay.
Thank you.
There you are. Any other questions or concerns, board members? Hearing none, I'd love to have a motion to approve the adoption of the 2020-2021 local control funding formula budget.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. And is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Munoz. So let's take a vote now. All in favor of adoption of this budget, raise your hands or signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The LCFF budget has been adopted unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Maldonado, I wondered if you wanted to say anything else before we address the last action item for tonight, which is the approval to submit the waiver application as soon as metrics allow.
No, I think that it's just a request for the board members to understand what my ask is, given the rapidly changing conditions and ways that we can best prepare to serve our parents' need and our whole community's need to have our schools open as safely as possible, as soon as possible. I'm asking for the board's approval to submit that waiver application as soon as the metrics allow.
Thank you so much. I think I want to clarify up front that whether we submit the application or not, this board has expressed to Ms. Maldonado and her team that the decision to return to school, if we're in the purple tier, must still be approved by the board. And we do have another board meeting scheduled on January 5th. So I wonder if there are any board comments or questions before I ask for the motion. Hearing none. May I have a motion to approve the submission of the waiver application as soon as metrics allow?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Capps, and seconded by Ms. Alvarez. And now please vote by signifying with the word aye or with raising your hand as to whether you approve the motion. Thank you. This motion passes unanimously. Please go forth and submit the waiver application.
Thank you, board members.
That takes us to our report and discussion agenda. And I believe the first one is the report on fundraising and track naming for Santa Barbara High School Peabody Stadium track.
For this item, we have Mr. Vizzolini. Do I have him on the queue?
I don't see him yet.
President Ford, is he with us, Meg?
Yes, and he's muted. Steve, you're muted. There we go.
Sorry about that. I had a little delay connecting there. Good evening, board members and Superintendent Maldonado. Recently, there's been renewed interest in the naming of the track at Santa Barbara High School's Peabody Stadium. A local community group is interested in having the track named after a revered coach from the school's past. The Foundation for Santa Barbara High School presented a application for a fundraising activity to the board in October of 2014, which was approved. The application had very specific naming rights related to donations for the track and the stadium project. And the application is attached for your review. Santa Barbara High School Principal Dr. Elise Simmons and Director of the Foundation of Santa Barbara for Santa Barbara High School, Ms. Katie Jacobs, are here tonight to update the board on their fundraising activities, to discuss the track naming opportunity, and to answer questions the board may have. So at this point, I would like to hand it off to Ms. Simmons and Ms. Jacobs for a presentation that they have for us.
So hello, everyone. I'm Katie Jacobs. I'm the director of the Foundation for Santa Barbara High School, and I'm excited to be here tonight. Welcome, Ms. Alvarez, to your first meeting of the board, and hello to the rest of the board members as well. I'll let Elise Simmons say a quick hello as well.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome Virginia Alvarez to the board, and congratulations, Kate Ford. And thank you, Steve. We're excited to be here tonight to share just some really great news with you all.
So as mentioned before, I'm the director of the Foundation for Santa Barbara High School. I was the director from 2011 to 2016 when we were fundraising for this. I'm going to take a page from your book and start with some gratitude to all of you. Your role in making this project happen, a reality for our school, is not lost on us, and we are extremely grateful to have a functioning track and field at our school again. So first, I'd like to start, before I get into what our fundraising was like, I'd like to start with a quick video. So next slide, which is our video, please.
It's honestly kind of surreal since I was a freshman seeing it and always the anticipation that I was going to be done.
I mean, it turned out really beautiful. I mean, I think it captures the Santa Barbara feel.
But yeah, I thought it was beautiful the first time I walked in here. The tradition is unlike anything else, and that we get to be a part of that is amazing.
And so now that I'm here and it's finally done, it's pretty exciting that I get to run, not in the same place as my mom, but the same area, and now it's just like finally done. I'm really excited to cheer and just making more memories with my friends.
I think I'm just really excited for what ASB is going to be able to do with it. There's so much space and it's so pretty. And so I think we're going to have a really good opportunity with pep rallies and graduation.
I'm hoping to make a few memories on this field, especially trying, it's my last year here. So hopefully trying to get a CIF championship for this school team.
I'm filled with excitement to finally be able to play on the stadium and be surrounded by all of the support and our fans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for contributing something so special to our Santa Barbara community.
So thank you again. Heartfelt thanks from everyone at Santa Barbara High School. I know our kids, well, some of our athletes are actually out in the field using it, and we are really looking forward to all of our kids being down there and the community using it when we are past COVID. Mr. Vizzolini asked me to come and remind everyone a little bit about what was in our fundraising plan. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about all the naming opportunities in addition to the track naming that's been out there. So this is a little bit of a reminder. Our campaign that we set upon was approved by the Board of Education back in October of 2014. We proposed a $5 million campaign that would last for 2 years, basically June to June, to get all of our pledges in. And then we allowed for multi-year pledges to be paid for a little bit longer than that. So if someone gave a 4-year pledge, they could make the pledge within the first 2 years, but pay that out for a couple extra years. It allowed us to accept some larger pledges over time. And we were able to achieve that. So all of our pledges were made by June of 2016, and all of our gifts were in by really the end of 2019. So next slide, please. The total payments to the Santa Barbara Unified School District were $4,750,000. We made them over basically in 3 installments in 2017, 18, and 19. The fundraising agreement also allowed us to hold back $250,000 for fundraising expenses. More than half of that went to the donor walls and signage that we're going to look at in a minute. And the rest of it went for fundraising expense, staff, events, printed materials, those kinds of things. That was only about 2.3% of our total fundraising amount. And then we presented the check to the Board of Education in February of 2018 when construction was underway. So next slide, please. So there were quite a few naming opportunities in the plan. Again, our purpose in this endeavor was really to raise the $5 million. So all the naming opportunities are linked to certain dollar amounts. Some of these options we did exercise and some we did not. So for example, we offered the combined track and field at $1.5 million. We did not get a gift at that level. We didn't get a gift either at the field level at $1 million. However, we did get 2 donations at a $500,000 level, 4 donations at the $250,000 level, and quite a few at the $100,000 level as well. So these were all the naming opportunities in the plan. There were some naming opportunities around a weight room and the sports med room, various rooms that were going to be built out underneath the stadium. But when those elements were taken out of the construction, we had to take out those namings as well. One thing I do want to note is that the team room, which we didn't know about when we first got into this, was already named after Marv Gu, a football athlete at Santa Barbara High School. So that naming will be retained in perpetuity, is my understanding. So that is always going to be the Marv Gu team room, even though it's not built yet. Okay, next slide. I wanted to go into now some of the namings that we actually have down there in the stadium. And the first is our scoreboard, which was a $100,000 donation from Montecito Bank and Trust. So I'm gonna do a little shameless plug here. If you are in the market for a bank that truly supports our community, look no further than Montecito Bank and Trust. They've been very generous to our school and really all the schools in our district. All right, next slide, please. We also have the Peter and Gerd Giordano Plaza, which is clearly named. And here are Peter and Gerd actually in the plaza with the school sports insignia there. The donor plaza is really beautiful. It's shown here at night. And the plaques each have lists of donors on them. Any donor that gave $10,000 or more to this campaign is on one of those plaques. All right, next slide. So also one of the plazas that was named is the Doug and Ann Allred Veterans Memorial. Originally, Doug was interested in either the weight room or the sports med room, but when that wasn't going to be built, we switched over to this memorial, and it is really fitting as Doug is a Naval Reserve officer. He's actually pictured, he's the one in the red there. He's class of 1953. So this is the naming memorial that he chose. So he was a Naval Reserve officer, and it just suits him perfectly. It's really one of my favorite places actually down in the stadium. All right, the next slide, please. The Hutton Parker Tunnel was also one of the named features. And there's Tom Parker standing out with some friends underneath the tunnel. And right now the tunnel connects from the underside of the stadium out to the field. Okay, next slide. So another area that was developed is the Marburg Cafe. This is actually on the side of the pre-existing field house. And right now the foundation is working with athletics department to further develop a serving area there. And we may need some additional funds, but we are working together on that project. But in the meantime, the cafe has been named for Marburg, who also gave a generous gift. All right, the last major named feature, thank you for switching the slide, is the track. And as I mentioned earlier, we had 2 donors that were $500,000 or more. And one of those 2 donors would like to exercise the option of naming the track. So we anticipate that that person will come forward and tell us what they would like to name it. It has not happened yet, but we anticipate that will happen, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So in addition to those were the major named donor opportunities in our fundraising plan. We also did name individual seats. So community members could purchase a seat for $1,000. And here you see 2 of our very proud members of also the class of 1953 sitting at their seats that they purchased. About 800 of community members took up that option and are now occupying just the center section of the stadium. There are quite a few more seats. I think there's 2,300 total seats in the stadium, and we did not name all of them. So future campaigns could use that option. All right, how about the next slide? I do also want to note that our very smart architects over at KBZ, in designing the press box, did this beautiful tile work. And in many of these cases, there are some blank areas in the tile that can be used for future naming opportunities. I know there is a group that is interested in naming the track after one of our honorary, or after one of our past track coaches, Bill Crow. You know, I hadn't heard anything about Bill Crow until about last year, but I know that there are a lot of other athletic greats in our community that people have come to me and said, oh, you really need to name something for so-and-so. Some of those so-and-sos are people like Mike Baropoulos, who's athletic director and just passed away last year. He's hugely revered. Same with Sam Cathcart, who passed away while we were doing this fundraising. His family did make a pretty nice donation to this practice as well. People like Claude Hardesty, who also gave his fortune basically to the Santa Barbara High School Alumni Association. So there's a lot of people, I think, that have come forward that are really deserving of honorary namings somewhere in the stadium or somewhere on campus. And yes, we want to name something after everyone who has made such an impression on the school. And Elise is going to talk a little bit about honorary namings as opposed to the paid namings that the foundation has done. All right, the next page, next one. I just want to take a quick second to thank our dream team of fundraisers who helped get us through this project. Our capital campaign chair was Greg Tebby, and now he's the president of our foundation. We really could not have raised $5 million on behalf of Santa Barbara High School without this group of people and without our honorary committee. So I am grateful to each and every one of them. Next slide, please. And I'm also grateful to all of you for sticking with all the bumps in this project. We know this was not what we expected when back when we were doing the fundraising in between 2014 and 2016. After that, you all had to get involved quite a bit, and we appreciate what you have done to give our school a track. Haven't had a track meet at the high school since 1980, and we're really excited to do that. I also want to say thank you to Steve Vizzolini, the facilities director, who's been wonderful to work with and what a hero for us. Also thanks to Richard Wordy, the project manager, and to Scott Brunsema of Lundgren Management for just working through all the headaches that any construction project entails. So I'm going to hand it over with the next slide to Elise so she can talk a little bit about honorary naming process.
Thank you, Katie. First, I just want to say thank you to everybody as well. I want to, before I even started as principal, I think one of my first visits to John in mid-May entailed a weekly meeting that took place in one of the construction trailers out there. And that weekly meeting happened every week for me. And I learned so much about construction, about terms, things that I never will want to use again or want to need to use again, but it was part of being a principal at Santa Barbara High. And as we come to a close in all of this, and being the principal for the last 3 years and serving as an assistant principal, the slogan, once a dawn, always a dawn, continues to ring true. And not only do we have a wonderful alumni base that is still continuously involved. When I look at the Dream Team list, more than half of those folks are still engaged with myself, with the Alumni Association, with our foundation, and I can imagine they will be engaged for the rest of their lives. So we're so appreciative of all that of our alumni who are still part of our community. And so we get a lot of requests for naming of benches. In fact, I walked around today with Spencer Barr, who's part of the Alumni Association, also a staff member. And we're talking about all the different opportunities that we have on our campus, benches, walkways, trees. Katie pointed out the plaques in the stadium, the blanks. And so what we'd like to do is create a committee, and I've already been communicating with the Alumni Association. So put together a committee made up of multiple stakeholders, identify those opportunities, and communicate out to our alumni base what those opportunities may be, and then review the submissions and make the selections. We're thinking of it taking place on an annual basis, and being thoughtful as well, because the last thing I also want to do is walk around campus and every single thing has a name on it. So being thoughtful about the process, the selections, and again, making it a team effort with students, staff, alumni, community members, parents, just putting together a team that will review these on a yearly basis. So that is the plan. And again, I think one of our first orders of business for sure is looking at the blanks that are in the stadium to figure out how to fill them and with whose name. And that is, I believe, the end of our presentation.
Thank you so much, Principal Simmons and Ms. Jacobs, for this presentation, and of course to Steve Vazzolini and his team for getting us to the end of this multi-year project and a beautiful new stadium at Santa Barbara High School, which I look forward to walking the track as soon as possible and take off the COVID pounds.
Yeah.
Members, that concludes this report.
Thank you. I wonder if there are members of my board colleagues who have some questions or comments. Ms. Capps.
Yeah, thanks for this information. If you could just clarify a little bit for me with the agreement. So the agreement for naming rights was 2014. I just want to get clear on this, on the time frame, even though it was on the slide. So the sort of price points of fundraising, which is all part of this, was made in 2014. Is that correct?
Well, the agreement was signed in 2014, yes. And then the agreement was that we would raise those funds between 2014 and 2016, correct?
Got it. And that previous board voted for that or approved it. Got it. Okay. And then this donation was made under that agreement.
Are you talking about the track donation?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It was.
Okay. And so the person is anonymous, which I respect. Is that person aware of the desire by some alumni to have it be named for this coach?
Yes. So last fall, Dr. Lannon, who some of you have been in touch with, came to the foundation and told me that they wanted to name the track after Bill Crow. And at the time I told him that I had a donor who gave the requisite amount to be eligible for the naming. Yeah. And that, you know, at that point I hadn't pushed the donor yet on, are you going to exercise that option or not? But then Dr. Lannon gave me a nice report about everything about Bill Crow. And so I took that to the donor and let the donor sit with that. So the donor is quite aware of that as well. Okay. And this person is a member of our community, is a member of social media, has kept up with this project and all of the controversy around it. Yes.
I understand. Again, I'm sorry, I just launched into my questions without thanking you all for the presentation, but also for all of the years of work and how hard it is to fundraise, and naming is a key part of that. So I certainly get that. I just am trying to get clarity. So really the, you know, understandable that Coach Crow is a beloved person and there's a desire to name him. But what I understand from your presentation is that you're looking at all options. But this has basically been spoken for in a binding agreement that a previous board has passed. Is that, am I catching up to the latest with this? Is that with that summation?
That would be how I view it. You are the board and you get to decide how binding it is, quite honestly.
Okay.
But I would say I do have a donor that, you know, I didn't understand there was any time limit on this, and this person, for reasons of their own, wasn't quite ready to come forward yet. But in my recent talks with this donor, they do want to exercise that option at some point.
Okay. Okay, well, here we are. Thanks for answering those questions.
Yeah.
So I take it process-wise, and maybe this is a Mr. Vizzolini question or Superintendent Maldonado. We're just listening to the sort of the latest update here, and then is it coming back to us for a decision? Is that the process?
There was a request to bring an update to this project for the board meeting. I don't believe we have an action to take at this point unless Mr. Vizzolini can advise me otherwise.
I don't believe there's any action to be taken at this point.
Right, that makes sense. So we're just bringing an update, and obviously if we, it would still stand.
And clarifying publicly what agreements have been in place in regards to this issue that has come up around the naming of the track.
Okay.
And so the full overview that Ms. Jacobs and Ms. Simmons have given us today contextualizes all of that issue for the board and others who are interested in this topic.
And is there other, I mean, I understand, again, I certainly understand as an alum myself, I understand the desires of the alum to honor Coach Crow. Are there other time limits that are put on agreements like this? I mean, I'm just trying to get some background. Was there any notion of a time limit on an agreement? Is that standard? This is not familiar territory to me. So if you could just elaborate, Mr. Vizzolini.
Sure. Ms. Capps, the board policy and the AR both refer to a time frame for the fundraising. There's no mention that I could find anyway that says that you have to name the thing within the same time frame. I don't know that the board might need to discuss that, but I don't see anything in board policy that says that there's a requirement that they name it. As long as the fundraising is in place, then they've met their obligation.
Understood. And obviously, we know that this project has gone longer than anyone wanted. So that's part of the reality that we're dealing with too, as well. The track is now just being completed or has been completed. So, okay, thanks for answering my questions. I really appreciate it.
Other questions? Ms. Alvarez.
I know there's great interest in Coach Crow. And Ms. Jacobs, do I hear you correctly that the donation has been received and it has been accounted for within the time frame, and the person who made the donation is going to make a decision at some point the name that will be given to the track? Is there any indication? Is this going to be 5 months, 6 months? Should we maybe perhaps a conversation to see what's the status? Any more information you can give us?
So yes, the person made the donation within the fundraising agreement time period. And this person actually, it was a donation greater than the amount required for the naming. I think if there wasn't a time limit going into it. So if that's something the board would like, this is a person in the community that I could certainly have a conversation with. So I would need some direction from you on a time limit. If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of address a couple of reasons why. I'm not saying that this is this particular donor's reason for not naming right away, but there are lots of legitimate reasons why a person in the community might not want to name something or might have a time frame different than what we might like to see. I think, many projects that are yet to be built, oftentimes donors want to see that it's built, that it's done well, that there's no controversy around the project before they put their name or some beloved person's name on the project. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the reasoning around why the donor's been maybe a little shy to come forward. This happened in the Matt Academy, their largest donor to their remodel project. When they made the donation, still had children at Santa Barbara High School. And so, when I'm dealing with alumni donors, often they'll have children or grandchildren or other people who they may not want the experience of their offspring to be changed by having the name on a building or something like that. So there are those kinds of reasons, and not to mention the most simple reason of as soon as you name something, especially if you name it for yourself, you have every one of our 2,000 nonprofits and people like me coming to you asking for money. So there's lots of reasons why it may not be on someone's time frame, or they may have their own time frame for wanting to name things at a certain point in their life. So they're all legitimate reasons, I think. If the board would like to talk about having a time frame, I'm certainly I'd welcome that kind of conversation to give us some direction. But at this point, I haven't pressured that person. It's kind of a tricky relationship sometime between donors and fundraisers. I want this person to be happy. I want this person to continue to give to Santa Barbara High School. And my interest is in raising the most money I can for the school and keeping those relationships positive and friendly and healthy.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board members? I have a couple questions. First of all, I echo the gratitude for the report and all the work that's gone into this. I have to say, as a former Dawn, I kind of get very emotional when I see a video like that. It's just so, it's such a special place, and even more special and more beautiful now. I did want to ask a couple of things. It seems to me that, being on the board, you have lots of information coming at you, but there are lots of stories out there about this fundraising. And I'm wondering, Ms. Jacobs, if you could be more specific about, we know that I guess the price tag now is 39 million, but is foundation fundraising for the stadium completed? Or is there still more fundraising to do? There are stories, rumors, truths out there, whatever they might be, that it's not, that the stadium's not really complete. So how will we pay for the completion?
So the foundation is as complete with this particular phase 1 fundraising project for the stadium. As I mentioned, the cafe has some needs around it. And I think that we are working with athletics to make it so that it's functional. So there may be some extremely minor fundraising to do around making sure that the athletic teams have a service capacity to do. Way back when we discovered that the interior of the building was not going to be completed, we saw that as a phase 2 fundraising effort. Maybe someday we could look at that again as a foundation project, but I think my foundation, we did a remodel of our gym. This is our second, major construction project at the high school. I think the appetite of my board right now wants to really focus on more of an academic project for our students, something that's not athletics. We're not an athletics foundation. It's just that 2 of our projects were athletics oriented. And really, honestly, it was more because so many of our PE kids need a place to be and to work out. There is no other place for that. So that was really our mission as a foundation, is to do the most good for the greatest number of students on campus. And this facility was going to do the most good for the greatest number of kids on campus. So I don't know what our next thing is. We're not going to immediately do the build out underneath the stadium. Maybe someday we will look at that again. I don't think that there's an appetite quite now for that.
That is so helpful to know. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Vizzolini, we don't have any plans at this time to do any additional work on the stadium either as a district. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. The only other question I have, and at the risk of getting a tiny bit in the weeds, is that I totally admire the efforts of Ms. Simmons to create this honorary naming committee. But Mr. Vizzolini, could you clarify for me? I thought that was to approve something like that has to come from the board. that all naming responsibility actually belongs to the board. Help me understand what I have right and or need to be corrected on.
I think you have it right. I think that what Ms. Simmons is talking about is maybe an organized plan at their school to come up with a process for figuring out who they would like to recommend to the board for a naming opportunity, but they don't have the authority to name something without board approval.
Okay, so it isn't that we would have to, the way I was kind of reading it, but perhaps too quickly, is that the board would actually have the right to give that responsibility to name and choose and do it all to this committee.
Actually, I believe that's right, because the board could, they could hand it off to a designate. So it could be the superintendent, it could be myself, it could be someone else in the community, but I think that that's accurate, yes.
Okay, thank you. Then I would just say, having listened to the presentation and the conversation, that perhaps that's one thing we should think about for the next phase of our board thinking about it, and then also possibly to think about whether we as a board need to at least ask Ms. Jacobs to work with the donor about a time frame for naming. Board members, did you hear anything else that you think might be a next step for us? Ms. Alvarez.
I think we should also consider reviewing the policy so that in the future is more clear, and that it clearly states the expectations and the responsibilities so that there's a time frame.
That makes sense too. Ms. Simmons-Moton.
And I would just say too, if we could maybe, you know, to add on to Ms. Alvarez, go back and look at review the minutes of when the board made that decision and what was that could really help us, you know, going forward. You know, what was their intent? Because again, they were thinking whatever the thinking was at that time, it maybe can give us an idea of now thinking if we go back and review those minutes.
I totally agree. And I think it would be helpful to review the policy and at least review the policy and then decide whether any modifications need to be made to it. So once again, hearing no other questions, seeing no other hands raised, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Vizzolini. Thank you, Ms. Simmons, and a special thank you to the foundation and Katie Jacobs.
Thank you all.
Excuse me?
Just thank you all. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
So with that, I believe we are doing the next report is the first reading and discussion of board policy 5126. Ms. Maldonado, who will handle that tonight?
For this one, it's along the same lines. We're looking at some board policy changes and language around scholarships and awards. So Ms. Carey, please take this over.
Yes, thank you. The reason this is coming to you is because of an unusual circumstance, and it's rare for us to receive donation funds and then disperse them to students for scholarships. Oftentimes, high schools will recognize student scholarships, and there may be donors, you know, on hand who fund those scholarships, but it's not usually the school district or school that processes those funds. But sometimes there are bylaws from donating foundations or individuals or parameters such that the donation needs to come through the school system. And so this amendment, this addition to Board Policy 5126 is recommended by our internal auditor in order to be very clear that in unique circumstances, it is acceptable for our district to accept funds for the purpose of dispersing scholarship funds to deserving candidates. That's the rationale for the ask. And I'm available for any questions. And I'll also ask Ms. Jate to just be available for any questions there might be, since it's more about a fiscal process.
And let me just add, board members, that I did ask Ms. Carey, based on one of the board members' questions about defining needy students and deserving students. We went a little further with this proposed language to include a definition of traditionally underserved students including Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, Native American, emerging multilingual, low-income students with disabilities, foster youth, so that when we are asked to receive these funds to disperse to our students through in the form of a scholarship, that we are aligned with our equity agenda and targeting those most in need. Any questions on this proposed change of language to our board policy?
Sorry, it's hard for me to see the group with a slide up. I don't see any questions.
Ms. Sims,
I do. Hey,
you have your hand up, please.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's hard with the screen up. So, Ms. Maldonado, are you saying that we're expanding this policy to include the most in need, but not excluding if someone wanted to give specifically for those underserved groups?
Not exclusively to the underserved groups, just defining who we agree would be, we want to receive funds from people who agree with our equity agenda of targeting certain groups of students, and we didn't want to leave it so broad. In our previous language that we were bringing, we were calling it deserving and needy students, but we now just expanded the language to be very specific as to who that would benefit.
Okay, great, thank you.
And to clarify, you would expect to bring this back in January to us on consent agenda?
Correct.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions? Then I must apologize. We did have one public speaker on the issue of the track, and I think we still can make that person's comments possible. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Trujillo.
Thank you, President. Apologies, President Ford. We have Sarah Henderson to speak. One moment.
Hello?
Yes, you may begin.
Sorry, is this for the track or for the new courses?
This is for Board Policy 5126, Awards for Achievement.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have put my agenda number on wrong. I was not planning on speaking on this issue.
Okay. So,
Sarah, what issue did you want to speak to?
She is, Sarah, can you unmute yourself?
Hello? 1 second, I just need to pull up the agenda. Sorry, discussion of 4 new high school course requirements.
That's fine. That's our next agenda item.
Okay. Can I just begin now then, or?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just speaking here today in favor of supporting the new History of Africans in America courses, parts 1 and 2. I think you all, I know, are in favor of ethnic studies, and this is an amazing way to expand that program out. And additionally, I hope that when we're thinking about expanding ethnic studies course requirements and courses, we make sure that there's support within the district for this expansion. And that means putting actual institutions in place to support it. So we recently got a new TOSA for the ethnic studies program, which is wonderful. Art Nelson Concordia, he's amazing. And I really hope that the district will continue to support his position with a department by any other name, depending on, definitions and stuff. But having that institution there in the district where he isn't just floating around, but has actual support and can use that support to extend to both the students, teachers, and community involved with ethnic studies is essential to continuing to bring these courses to our students. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. And President Ford, this concludes public comment.
Thanks so much. And so with that, we will begin our final report about the 4 new high school course requests. Will that go to Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Yes, me again. So I'll begin by just asking for the board's consideration and hopefully future approval of the elective course that you see designed for La Cuesta and the alt ed space. We look for a proliferation of elective offerings for our alternative programs, which of course have limited staffing and limited credentialing among their in-person teachers. So these are online elective courses that we always seek to expand for our continuation and alternative ed students. You'll see there also a dual enrollment course. I want to clearly state that dual enrollment courses that our students take do confer credit on high school transcripts toward high school graduation, in case there was any confusion about that earlier this evening. And so this is a course that will be a companion course, a follow-up course to English 110, which is already widely subscribed to by our students, our high school students. And then of course, Bring It Home, the courses 3 and 4 here are 2 semester-long courses, History of Africans in America. And you can see it's the chronology from the ancient African past through the Civil War and then into the modern era with a 2nd semester course. So we are very pleased to be bringing you these 2 dynamic courses. Long overdue to be bringing them back after years of not being active, but also to be pleased to bring them to you through a revived teacher committee that is a committee too that is part of an entire team of ethnic studies teachers. So this is both a social studies elective course and also a course that will qualify to fulfill the ethnic studies grad requirement. We are prepared with the instructional materials on, having been ordered and with teacher training lined up for January 7th to actually have this course run 2nd semester at Santa Barbara High School, have both these courses, do the block schedule, run 2nd semester at Santa Barbara High School with a vision and a view to having them run at other schools beginning as early as next school year. And with that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carey. These sound amazing. Any questions from board members? Comments? Please, Ms. Sims-Moten.
Yes, I want to say thank you and to this and the team who's working and bringing this and knowing that we have those next step and it's really that much closer to implementing something that this board had really taken, to task in terms of making ethnic studies a graduation requirement, even much ahead of where the state is going and other districts. So I want to make sure that that is acknowledged. And the other question that I have is the courses that are coming. Has we worked with the ethnic studies subcommittee group? Has that curriculum already gone through that process, or because it's important that that group is still part of the curriculum that was there, and that was a desire and actually an actual ask from that group in terms of that. So were they involved with regards to the curriculum for these 2 courses that are coming?
So I think you mean do you mean Ethnic Studies Now, the community group?
Yeah, yes, or actually the smaller group that was maybe the members of it were on the grad committee looking at the curriculum. So I just want to make sure that they were part of that.
Okay, so that I think the best way to respond to you is that there are multiple groups of people who are aware of and interested in this curriculum. We've got our high school grad requirements committee, and of course the subcommittee there on ethnic studies. We have our community-based group, Ethnic Studies Now. We have our own staff committees, which we refer to currently as the Ethnic Studies cadre. And there are subsets of the cadre, the English courses, the social studies courses. This is a whole teacher committee dedicated just to Black studies. And of course, these course titles have the more specific name of History of Africans in America. But as we've heard from our community over weeks and months and longer, what we really hope to see is a menu of ethnic studies course offerings to be responsive to the demands of our community and to offer students choice. And then we also have a curriculum committee who handles all the internal processes like submission to A through G and making sure it's in the course catalog and master scheduling So multiple committees have worked on this, and it's their combined efforts that have brought it to this point today. The high school graduation requirements committee specifically has not convened during COVID, so that'll be something that we look to do soon.
Yeah, well, I thank you. I'm sure that there has been. I just think we cannot over communicate that enough about all the folks that have been involved with it, as you know. So I think, you know, the more that we can communicate where we are in that process and who's involved with that process, and I think that people will feel much more involved, and their thoughts and, you know, input is being heard in multiple levels. And lastly, the other question is about that. This has come up throughout the whole thing with regards to, are we looking at, or did we ever have an ethnic studies department? So I just want clarity on that. So that's kind of come back and forth because of things prior to this board, you know, being seated.
Yeah, yes. So it happens to be responsive to the public comment that we've just heard, but it's also true that we know that in many ways ethnic studies helps to redress a lot of the institutional gaps that exist for students, and I hear the sound rationale for making sure that ethnic studies implementation in Santa Barbara Unified is actually institutionalized and is protected, and so it isn't vulnerable to the changing tides of who knows what forces in our society or our government, or so I think that's very sound. What we need to do is, we've had a structure of departments in the past. We transitioned as a district to systems of PLCs, district-wide PLCs, and cadre teams. Now that we have our ethnic studies TOSA on board, and he's got his legs under him here in month 2, we plan, and we've already had some preliminary conversations with HR to explore how to reinstitute the possibility of reinstituting an ethnic studies department, so it can be sort of held across all school sites.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I want to continue to still be involved in that, and want to be an ambassador to the community of what's going on and how we're doing that, because we wanted to make sure that it is institutionalized, and whether this board is here or in previous and other boards coming behind us, that's a crucial piece as we begin to look at equity, looking through an equitable lens, and as we institutionalize that, then these things will stay. I just have one more comment, and this is to Superintendent Maldonado, and this is for later, but I just want to mention, because we're talking about equity and systemic issues. I'm wondering if we could maybe work together, maybe it's something you're already thinking about, to have an equity statement that is elevated to a statement and or a resolution, because again, I think the statement elevates what is implied in terms of equity. So we could work on that together for future times. I know you got your plate full, but just while we're in this realm of that, it would be really good to have that there. And again, and then all the things that are happening becomes the action behind that statement. So
yes, and I think a theme that's come up for me hearing tonight's presentation and the comments that have been made, that working on something like that through the lens of equity for budgeting and staffing and organizing ourselves as a district, so that we move from talking about equity and acting on it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. Those are great questions. Ms. Munoz.
Yes, I would also, like to, I agree with that, having the conversation with including, ethics studies now and the community groups, so that we have that transparency in terms of, a course such as, such as we're talking about history of Africans, and such, just to, emphasize the community conversation with that. And of course, very supportive of an ethnic studies department, standardizing it so that we have that in place, and what all that would involve would be something I definitely would be interested in going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Capps.
Yeah, I concur. And I, again, just want to thank some people that reached out to us with such compelling, are with us even at this, your dedication is profound, and we share it. This is a board, Ms. Alvarez is new to the board, but the four of us, we voted for ethnic studies as a requirement. We're now seeing the implementation. It's one of the reasons I wanted to remain on this board, especially with ethnic studies being under assault. And we are committed, and I'm happy to hear from Ms. Not at all surprised, but happy to hear that you are supportive of the suggestion that's put forward by the community of an ethnic studies department. I think we should do what we can to institutionalize it, to use your word, because of those in our area who sort of frankly doubt the science, doubt the benefits of ethnic studies for all students in all areas, not just a core curriculum. But I would have loved to have taken this course when I was at Santa Barbara High. I had to get this type of course when I went to Berkeley after graduating as a history major. So I'm all for it. I would love, my question really, and now that I've stated my commitment, is to you about which, you said it's going to be expanded to the other high schools. That was also a question from the community. Can you elaborate plans about that at this point?
So this is a good opportunity for me to say that we have actually formed 3 teacher curriculum development subcommittees to bring back what I'm going to call historical courses. So Black Studies is one example. Chicano Studies is another, Mexican American Literature. So those, we surveyed all English and Social Studies teachers 712 for interest in serving on those committees. Those committees have been established. The Black Studies was on an accelerated timeline. The Black Studies courses, I think most board members are aware. So it was an ambitious timeline, but we're delivering on that timeline, as I said, by even making the course offering mid-year. And I mentioned the training on January 7th. So what we hope to have happen is once we have the experience of that training, there are other members on the subcommittee who have indicated interest in potentially being the instructors for the course next year at San Marcos or Dos Pueblos. So we just have to see how that goes. It may be that we need to we need to see what kinds of processes might need to be in place to appropriately staff the offerings across our school sites.
Thank you. And along those lines, just time frame. You just did I hear you correctly that this will be started in January? Is that correct?
Yes.
So, and I know that there was some confusion that we were actually going to be voted. Can we just explain that for those who are listening, that we're not voting tonight because that's our procedure to first hear about it, but ostensibly on consent, or again for a vote early January so that it can move forward? Is that the plan?
So it's typical that we bring to you requests for new course approvals in 2 phases, one for report, so there can be questions and discussion as we're having tonight, and then subsequently for action at the next meeting. It's certainly acceptable to move for action tonight, given the conversation that we've had. Either way, we will be on track because our next regular board meeting is January 12th, and our second semester starts January 19th. So we are prepared to initiate this course January 19th at Santa Barbara High School, pending the board's approval, should it come tonight or on January 12th.
Well, thanks for that explanation. I certainly, again, I'd like to follow protocol, but it might make sense to vote for action tonight. That's the board president's call there. And I lastly wanted to say, congratulations to Mr. Concordia. So many people are raving about him in emails to us. So I guess he's here. It's just been 2 months, but he's off to a great start. So I just wanted to lend my support and gratitude, the theme of the night, to his work already, because it's clearly making an impact.
Thank you. Ms. Alvarez.
Yes. Are we going to start budgeting for next year, right, Meg? In a couple of months, or if you haven't started already. And I would like our budget to reflect our equity priority. I like our budget to include the 2 TOSAs for San Marcos or DP, or an equity department, or I like to continue this discussion. I also like the idea of an equity statement. That, thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. That's something that Ms. Maldonado and I had talked about before. So I'm really supportive of that, and I like to help with that as well. So as we move forward, let's make sure that these priorities are included in our budget.
Oh, thank you so much. Just a couple of thoughts from me. First of all, 100%, this board is on board with this effort. This board is of one mind and supports all of these efforts and is so appreciative of the way that our committee, your leadership, Ms. Carey, your support, Ms. Maldonado, has led this to be a leading edge effort, and one that we can really be proud of, and also just hold ourselves accountable to move forward as powerfully and quickly as possible. I also want to say that we're trying to keep our board as disciplined and thoughtful as possible. So I don't want to move it to an action item tonight. It's a report item, and I think that's the way it must stay in order to make sure we're really following Brown Act. However, we will happily, I am sure, vote for this and make sure it happens as soon as possible.
Thank you, President Ford. And we recognize that that will be the process and are prepared to move forward.
Perfect. Well, with that, I want to say that we're just about to close this public meeting and go into closed session. And if there are any action items for our public who are still with us that must be reported out, we will come back to open session after closed session. But I do just want to share a thought. And I promise you, I thought about these words before this meeting, which only just reinforces the fact that we are all on the same page. And it is so gratifying to be with a group of people that believe the same thing. But I wanted to share that as we say goodbye to 2020 in the next couple of weeks, we must remember that there are so many people in our community who are suffering. There are many who are working really hard to keep us safe and healthy. And there are many who have dedicated innumerable hours above and beyond to educate our students. We've heard so many stories of our teachers. And the best way, as many of you have already stated, to celebrate the holidays this year has to be to focus on gratitude. And I was thinking that even though this year teachers and staff won't receive cute cards and sweet gifts from their students, I just would ask all of us and members of the community to remember that a text or an email of appreciation to teachers and staff members will go a long way to bring a smile to their faces. And they are, as Ms. McBride said, they are a very real part of our community's essential workers. I know that lots of district staff are going to be working over the break, so you can be assured that we are all at the ready to stay informed with the latest news and information, as well as to serve this community. So please, please stay home, wear a mask, and have a happy holiday. And we will see you on January 5th, 2021. And with that, this meeting is adjourned to closed session.
Actually, with the meeting, adjourned to closed session, and we'll be back to report out any actions, correct?
That's right.
Thank you.